Hi everyone, hopefully this is working. This is the first time I've ever attempted to go live on my YouTube channel. So if anybody out there can actually see me, can you please let me know if that's okay? Is this working? Ah, it looks as though we're working. Excellent. Can you please let me know in the chat if you can see and hear me okay, if that's okay, please? Excellent. Oh, 10 people watching. Brilliant. So hopefully, excellent. It's working. That's a relief. This is the first time I've ever tried to do anything like this on my YouTube channel. I've only ever done one live stream before, so this is very new to me. And I say this is the first time I've ever tried it on YouTube, and I'm using new software. I've got new likes, everything just very new. And the problem with this is you can't test it out beforehand. You basically go live and just hope that it works. But it looks as though we are working, so that is absolutely brilliant. Perfect. So firstly, a massive thank you everyone for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. What I'm going to do tonight is basically talk you through my bag. I'm going to be answering your questions live. I'm going to talk about the equipment that I use, my approach to wedding photography, and then I'm going to show you some of my favorite images and how I've created them. But this is a live stream, so I want it to be really interactive. So if you could please ask me any questions, I can see the chat. So my intention will be to try and answer as many questions as I can. Because I say, the more interactive it is, the better. Just looking at the comments. Excellent. Hi, everyone. This looks to be perfect. Yeah, excellent. This is such a relief, honestly, because it's very daunting going live for the first time. But yeah, it is all good. So yeah, I hope you're all doing well. And firstly as well, a massive thank you. This is the first time I say I've been live on the YouTube channel, but I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for subscribing to my channel and helping to make it what it's become. It's really become a big part of what I do now. Because when I started the channel, I think it's nearly 3 years ago now, but when I started, this was completely alien to me. I never would have imagined that I would have ended up in a position where I'm making videos, I'm talking on camera, because I'm a really shy, introverted person. So none of this comes naturally to me at all. And I never would have thought it would have got to this stage, but I've learned to really enjoy the process of making videos. And that, combined with receiving so many lovely comments on my videos from you all, has meant that, you know, I've got loads of enjoyment out of it. And it's something now that I just want to continue trying to grow and progress in. So yeah, thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for all the comments that you receive in my videos. It really does make a difference. It's receiving those kind comments that really pushes me on to want to make more and better content for you. So yeah, I really appreciate that. So what I'm going to do first of all, I say, is talk you through the equipment that I use at a wedding day. But before that, I want to firstly just talk about my approach to wedding photography, because I always feel as though if you were to look at my, say, website or certainly my Instagram, you probably think that most of the photographs that I take on a wedding day are creative portraits, say, because that's what I show the most of. But that is really not the case. I approach a wedding day with the opinion that the vast majority of the day I want to be not seen by the bride and groom. I want to blend into the background, and I want to shoot the wedding in a very documentary fashion. Now that is completely at odds to what you see on my Instagram. And the reason for that is because I feel as though the creative portraits, the big, I hate this word, but epic off-camera flash portraits, they are what often get bride and grooms interested. That sort of gets me online attention. But I don't really feel as though those images have they're not going to last for years and be timeless. Whereas the documentary images, I feel, will do that. But it's very difficult, I feel anyway, to build a business on documentary images, whereas it is much easier, I feel, to get attention and to build a business when you're concentrating on showing creative photographs. So I'm always very conscious that if you look at my channel, you will probably, sorry, I'm just putting this on the iPad as well so I can see what's happening, that you will probably feel as though I just take non-stop creative portraits on a wedding day, but that's not the case. So what I'm going to do now is just attempt to show you anyway, some of my favorite documentary images, purely to give you an idea about what it is I take on the majority of a wedding day. So let's just flick through some of these. I'm not going to so much talk through these as such, but I just want to give you an idea that these are the photographs that I take. Mainly, I say 90% of a wedding day for me is about shooting that wedding day in a documentary fashion. Because ultimately, I feel as though these images are going to be the most important in years to come. You know, I always picture like bride and grooms looking back at their pictures in maybe 30, 40 years or something like that. And I say, I don't believe it will be the off-camera flash portraits that they look at. It will be the moments, especially those moments that bring back lots of emotion. And that's what I'm really trying to achieve on a wedding day. I want that wedding day to happen as if I wasn't even there. And that's not always easy, but it's an approach that I strive to do. So as I say, you probably won't see a lot of these photographs, I say, on my Instagram because of the reason that I've just explained. But I always want to make it clear that this is how I approach a day. Because, I say... And when I have inquiry meetings with couples, this is basically what I'm talking to about. I'm explaining to them how and why I feel as though documentary images are the most important. Because again, you know, it's something that not all couples, I think, realise at the time of booking a photographer. I think what they often want initially is the big epic portraits. And I say, I do love taking those, and that's what, the majority of what I show online is that, because that's what couples want to see at the outset. But as years go on and as time goes on, I feel as though these photographs that we're looking at now will just gain in value, and the portraits will probably lose that little bit of value. But as I say, it's the portraits that are essential to the way that I work. They're absolutely vital, because that is what gets me, attention online. And I feel as though that's what bride and grooms first want. So that's why I show lots of those on my Instagram. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about the approach that I take to a wedding day. So let's just go back here. Excellent. I think as well, I can actually share some of your comments. So yeah, thank you for that comment. What gear am I using tonight? If you're talking about the actual live streaming, I'm actually live streaming using one of my Sony A9 cameras. And I'm using software called Ecamm, which I believe is only for the Mac. It appears to work really well. So that's brilliant. This just blows my mind. Just looking at the comments. Hello from Costa Rica. Hi to you. Hello from India. Hi from Scotland. Hi from Germany. Honestly, this is insane. It's just crazy how, people from all around the world can just join together like this. It never ceases to amaze me. So yeah, thank you for everyone for joining. Amazing. So Steve's asked, wonder if you're looking to put on some wedding workshops next year. I've registered but figured you're in the COVID holding pattern. Yes, I do have dates set for next year. I've not published them publicly yet because I'm not selling them as yet, because I just want to make sure that they're going to go ahead. Unfortunately, I had 4 workshops for for October, November this year, but obviously only one of those 4 could go ahead because we had another lockdown in the UK. So I've moved those dates to March next year. But before I advertise them publicly, I just want to make sure that they can go ahead. So yeah, as soon as I can, we will be doing more workshops. Hi from South Africa. This is crazy. Hi from Hungary. Hi, Tommy from Nuneaton, a little bit closer to home. Hi from Paraguay. Crazy. So, shall we look through my bag? Now, some of you may have seen me talk about things that I have in my bag before, but I always think it's really useful to go through because a lot of the questions that I receive are about equipment. Now, something that you'll probably hear me say more than once tonight is that I'm not a big I'm not a big gearhead. I don't go, big on buying the latest and greatest gear all the time. To me, cameras, lenses, speed lights, all of those things, they're just tools. All they do is enable me to take the images I want to take. But I don't sort of stress over buying the latest and the greatest all the time. And I feel as though, as photographers, one of the things that holds us back a lot is this sort of this belief that we can only be as good as we want to be if we spend more money on lenses, if we buy that new camera. That is rubbish, basically. So I've never taken the approach of wanting, the most expensive equipment. And in fact, sometimes I'll purposely not want to buy the most expensive equipment because what I'm prioritizing is gear that is practical, so lighter, smaller, things like that. Having said that, I did make a big investment a couple of years ago when I moved from Nikon DSLRs to Sony mirrorless cameras, and that wasn't cheap, and that has improved my photography. So that's a little bit hypocritical of me because I have moved to Sony and that has improved my work. But that's basically the only time when I've really heavily invested in one go. Because apart from that, what I always think is far, far more useful for us all if we want to improve is not looking to buy a new lens, a more expensive lens. It's going out with your camera and practicing. So firstly, I'm just going to talk you through my camera. I'm not going to dwell on all the equipment because what I really want to get into are the images and how I've created those. I'm sure that that's probably what a lot of you have tuned in for. So firstly, I shoot on two now Sony A9 cameras. These have been amazing and my work, I feel, has improved since moving to Sony. The reason being that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I'm primarily a documentary wedding photographer. I'm just going to turn this iPad off. It's a little bit distracting. I'm primarily a wedding photographer. I'm primarily a documentary wedding photographer. And the A9 really helped me with my documentary images, mainly for three reasons. One, it has an EVF. So if you've not used a mirrorless camera before, the EVF is a bit of a game changer. What that basically stands for is the electronic viewfinder. And what that means is what you see through the viewfinder is the actual interpretation of what you're going to get if you press the shutter. So when you look through a DSLR, you're looking at the real light and it doesn't change regardless of whether you change your aperture, your shutter speed, ISO, what you see through the viewfinder remains exactly the same. With a mirrorless camera, it changes in real time. So you're seeing what you're going to get before you press the shutter, and that makes it really easy to get your exposures correct. So that's one thing. The other thing that I love about this camera, which is why I chose the A9 over the A7 III, which was the other option that I had, is the silent shutter, basically. So with the A7 III, you can shoot silently, but it has banding issues, especially if you're shooting at very quick shutter speeds. Whereas the A9 doesn't have those issues to anywhere near the same degree. It does still every now and again give you a little bit of banding, but it's very, very rare and it's not really a problem. So I tend to shoot now the whole day completely silently. And you can imagine if you're a documentary photographer trying to capture moments and emotion, and especially for me, I like to get close. I'm a firm believer that the closer you are, the better your images will be. So the fact that I'm close means that I really do want to be shooting silently, because if not, if you've got and you're just very noisy, it's going to impede on the moments, and I'm trying to do the opposite. I want to capture the moment without people even realize that I'm there. So the silent shutter is amazing. So they're the biggest things that I love about the A9, say the EVF and the silent shutter. The other thing, which is mind-blowing for me anyway, when I went from Nikon to Sony, is just how well this camera focuses. Now, this will be the same, I think, for most mirrorless cameras, but the focus was a game changer. From going from a DSLR where I wouldn't really trust the focus to this camera where I trust it implicitly. And as well, when you've got features like eye autofocus, real-time tracking, it's night and day from what I was using. So this has changed the way that I work in a big, big way. But I'm not going to sort of dwell on the cameras too much, but I do have to give props to the A9 because it has been a massive, massive help. So we'll now talk, and I have two of those, one of which you're seeing this stream on. So that is brilliant as well, that I can also use it as a webcam. Now I'm going to talk you through my lenses. If you're aware of my work already, you'll probably already know that I am a massive believer in being light with my lenses, in having only a small number of lenses, and for me, the two best lenses to capture documentary are without doubt the 35mm and the 85mm. Oh, just before I carry on, I've watched a few live streams on YouTube, and I believe that the streams get pushed out more the more likes the stream gets. So I think at the moment we've got 53 people. Can we all press the like button if that's all right, please? Let's just see if that boosts the numbers up. Say I'm a big fan of watching YouTube live, and everyone seems to say press the like button, see how many likes we can get. So if you wouldn't mind just hitting the like button underneath this stream, I'd really appreciate it. So let's see, we're on 19 at the moment. Say this stream as well, by the way, will probably last for around 2 hours, depending on how many questions I get asked. Excellent. Thank you for hitting the like button, everyone. I massively appreciate that. Just a question here before we go on. I'm doing the same, shoot very close, and after some time people forget about me because I'm not making any sound. Exactly that. You can become invisible when you're shooting silently. Obviously you can, because you're shooting silently. So, it stands to reason. And that really does help, I find, especially if you want to shoot documentary. So, sorry, apologies if I got your name wrong here. Fady has asked, time to switch to mirrorless. How much longer DSLR? I don't ever want to sort of say DSLRs are old fashioned or they're dead or anything like that. But for me, I can only ever talk for me. And hopefully if you've watched my videos, you'll be aware that I can only ever give you advice which I feel is correct. What I would never do is say, you should do this, you should do that. Whatever you want to do and is best for you is what you should do. For me, mirrorless has been amazing. But that's not to say it will work for everyone. Some people prefer the feel of a big, heavy camera, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I would never tell anybody what to do, but from my point of view, yeah, mirrorless has been brilliant, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for hitting the like button, everyone. We're up to 41 now. I really appreciate that. So let's just move on. So lenses wise, as I don't know if I just mentioned, but I'm a massive advocate for basically using two lenses for most of the day. And that for me is the 35 and the 85. And I'll use those two lenses for probably 90 or even more, 90% of the wedding day. What I don't want to do is be changing lenses every 2 minutes. I used to do this. In years gone by, I would have maybe 6 or 7 lenses in my bag, and I felt mentally that I've got to use them all, and I'd be changing lenses all the time. And what that meant is that basically I was missing moments. So by being really light with your equipment, and if you just concentrate on having two lenses, as I say, for me, the 35 and the 85, what you'll find is that you will miss your other lenses. You will miss having a 70-200. There might be times when you want to shoot wider than 35, so you could think, oh, if only I had that. But what you'll gain is far better, because what you'll end up gaining is being reactive. If you see something, you'll know where you need to stand. The other thing which I love about using prime lenses is that it gives you muscle memory. So if you've got a 24-70, for example, and you pick that up, what's to say what focal length you're on? So you might pick that up and think, oh, I'm going to want to shoot wide, but you're at 70, so you've got to zoom out. And don't get me wrong, these things don't take a long time, but when you're trying to get documentary imagery, you need to be really quick, because moments are so fleeting. If we just look at, say, this shot, that moment would have lasted for a couple of seconds and it's gone. So I want to be able to be in a position where I know where I want to stand immediately, as soon as I lift that camera up. So that's why I personally feel as though primes are so good for documentary. They give you muscle memory. So if you see something like that happening, you know where to stand physically before you even lifted up the camera. Now, that doesn't happen overnight, but the more you use just primes and you get really used to the focal lengths, you will learn what they're going to give you, and you won't even need to think in the future about where you need to stand. It will just happen automatically, and when you get to that point, your images will start to improve in a big way quickly. So yeah, prime for that reason I think are brilliant. And I say for me, it's a 35 and 85. Now I can't show you the 35 that I'm using because I'm filming on it, but it is the 35, the Sony 1.8 35mm, the FE lens, and it's a beautiful lens. One of the reasons I like that lens as well so much is because it's tiny compared to in the past, like some of the lenses that I use. It is really, really small and lightweight, and again, that adds to the whole feeling of being discreet. So yeah, that's a really, really nice lens. Now before that lens, I was using the Samyang 35mm 1.4, and I really like that lens as well, but it didn't like being dropped on concrete. So yeah, that's the only reason that I changed to the Sony 35mm, is because basically I dropped my previous Samyang lens on concrete. But having said that, I do prefer this lens purely because of the size difference. I'd much rather have a small 1.8 lens than a larger 1.4 lens. Again, for me, it's about being practical, and I want light, small equipment. So that's the 35mm lens. And I say the 35mm, what you're looking at this live stream on, is what I would take at least half of every single picture that I ever take with. It's always on one of my cameras. And I should have mentioned as well, sorry, I always use two cameras at the same time on a wedding day. The 35mm is always on this side, and the 85mm is always on this side. And I use a hold fast strap on a wedding day. So this goes over, and I just have the two cameras either side of me. Now the reason that I like shooting that way, again, is to do with muscle memory. If I made a mistake and put the 85 on this side, it's going to start messing up my my OCD and my muscle memory. To say it's always the same, always 35, always 85. And I say what happens then is it just becomes instinctive. You don't need to think anymore when you're taking shots. It's like, oh, I need to stand there and I need to do that, and then you've got your composition. So that's the 35. This is my 85mm, which is a Sony FE 1.8 85mm lens. Again, a really nice lens. I never actually use the lenses like that. This is how I'd always use this lens. Again, one of the reasons I like it is it's so small. And I should just add that when I was shooting with Nikon, I deliberately used the 1.8 versions of their 35 and 85mm lenses. I did own the 1.4 versions, but they were bigger and they were a little bit slower to focus because they have physically more glass in them. So again, for the way that I wanted to work, I prefer to lose the ability to shoot at 1.4, but gain the ability to be lighter and smaller equipment. So yeah, that's the reason that I always will prefer smaller lenses. So to put that down there. Just before we go on to the other lens, I'm just going to just break off and add answer a couple of questions. So question here. Hi, try some of the effects that you use. DSLRs can stay as long as a DSLR. Yeah, I would agree with that. This is something that I will cover. Good question, Leah. Thank you. What is your lighting setup for receptions? I will touch on that a little bit later. With big hands, I need a big camera. Is that an Indian wedding? Yes, the image that you saw there, which I think you're referring to, which is this one. This was from a wedding that I shot this year, which was an amazing day. I really enjoyed that wedding. Question here from Andy. And what I don't want, Andy, is for this stream to make you think, oh, I've got to go out and buy loads of stuff. I'm not about that at all. Again, all I'm doing is telling you about my journey and my experiences. Do not think that this is the only way or it's the right way. Whatever feels right for you is the right way for you. I would never, what I call, should on someone. I would never say you should do this, you should do that. I can only give you my experiences. So I hope you don't feel as though you've got to go out and break the bank after this. Hopefully not. Good question here from Norma. Can you use Canon lens with an adapter, or are they just Sony lenses? It's as though I asked you to ask that question, which I didn't, I promise. But yeah, one of my lenses, and this is purely just to use for portraits, is the Canon 50mm 1.2 lens. Now, the reason that I love this lens so much is because for portraits, especially when the light is good. And by that, what I'm really referring to is evening light, where the sun is low in the sky. This lens is beautiful for portraits. Now, I have made a whole video on this lens, which is on my channel, so some of you may have seen it. If not, it's probably from about 2 months ago. So I'd definitely recommend, if you're interested in using a non-native lens on your Sony camera, then yeah, go and check that out. And I use there's basically two adapters that you can use that I'm not aware of anyway, if you want to shoot with a non-native lens on a Sony. One of them is the Metabones adapter, and one is one that I have, which is the Sigma MC11. Now, the reason that I went for the MC11 is basically because it was cheaper. And when I was looking online at the reviews, there didn't really seem to be a big difference between the two, so I just went with the cheaper option. But it worked really, really well. Autofocus works, which is a big bonus. I didn't expect that to work. So yeah, I love it. But this is the only lens that I think I'll have, which I'll ever buy, which is non-native. And I say it's because this lens, the Canon 50mm 1.2, is brilliant for low light because of the flare that it gives. So if you shoot into the sun with this, you're going to get really cool flare, which unfortunately you don't seem to get on native Sony lenses. It was the same with Nikon. You didn't really get sun flare with their lenses either, because they put coating on the lenses to stop flare, whereas I want the opposite. I think as wedding photographers are a bit unique, that often we want the imperfections. So that's the reason that I own that lens, but that's the only one. And any lens I have to buy now has to take the place of one of my existing lenses, because what I don't want to have a bigger bag. So if I'm going to get anything new, it has to take the place of something else. And at the moment, I'm really happy with everything that I use now. Everything that I'm talking you through as well, by the way, fits in my bag. And that is a Low Pro Tactic bag. I think it's the Pro Tactic AW2. I'll lift it up in the end. I can't lift it up at the moment because everything's going to tip out. But yeah, everything fits in this backpack. And that's how it has to be now, because again, I want to be able to travel light. I don't want two bags. I want a massive bag, so everything fits in here. The other quick lens which I use is the Sony 16 to 35mm 2.8. This is a really nice lens. I don't use it very often, but at the end of the day, we're shooting weddings. There will be occasions where you need to shoot wider than 35mm. Especially if you're taking group shots and maybe you're inside and you're restricted by space. You want to then be able to shoot wider. This is like a get out of jail lens for me, really. It's not something that I use very often, but it is good to have in your bag in case you need it. The other time that I'll use this will be for, say, scene setting shots, maybe a big wide shot in a church, and on the dance floor, where I like to get really close and maybe zoom out to even 16mm sometimes. So yeah, the Sony 16 to 35 2.8. And lastly, this is the lens I'm not the biggest fan of, if I'm being honest, because it is massive, and it is the Sigma 135 1.8 lens. Now, I like the 135 focal length. I think that works really well, especially for portraits, but this lens is a beast. It's like if I take the lens hood off and we compare this to, say, the 85mm. Actually, let's put this back on. I'm going to be fair. So 135 versus 85, you'll see that the difference is massive. So it's not only big, it's also heavy. So the image quality of this lens is really good. I do really like the images that come out of it, but it is very, very heavy. So you have to really weigh up whether it's worth having a lens that is so big and heavy in your bag. You know, I have it, and again, I bought this because it's it was cheaper than the other options. It's far, far cheaper than the Sony 135. But, you know, would I recommend it? Probably not, to be honest, because of its size. But I do recommend having a 135 in your bag if you've got the space. Just because, again, just as with a 16 to 35, it's like a get out of jail lens in case you need something wider. Sometimes there are occasions on a wedding day where you need something longer than an 85. especially in the UK, we're often banished to the back of churches. And if that's the case, we want something longer than an 85. So that's the reason I have it. I say mainly for portraits, but also for those occasions where you need a longer focal length than 85mm. And they're all the lenses that I use. So again, just to recap, 35mm and 85mm almost the whole day long. And then just in case I need them, the 16-35, the 135, and then purely for portraits, the Canon 50mm 1.2. So let's just see if we've got any questions. Again, if you've not done so already, again, if I could ask you to hit the like button, I'd massively, massively appreciate it. Thank you. Let's just see what questions we have here. So I know you mentioned, let's see this one. So question from Michael. I know you mentioned 9% plus with the 35 and 85, but do you ever use a focal length beyond the 135 of the Sigma? No, I don't. Basically, I have no lens that I own for Sony that is longer than 135mm. I can't really think of any occasion where I would want something longer than that. I say the only time that really the 135 is, I feel is really needed is if I'm at the back in a church. But other than that, I don't really ever use it. So I definitely wouldn't need anything longer than that. In my opinion anyway. I say, do you have to do what's right for you? I should just mention as well that my way of shooting was really sort of rammed home to me about 5 years ago when I was listening to an amazing photographer called Tyler Workin. Now, Tyler is a photojournalist for wedding photographer, so he shoots everything in a very, very strict documentary fashion, and I loved his approach and the way that he works. And one of the things that he was really sort of pushing was be really economical with your lenses. In other words, just strip it all back, become really minimalist, 35 and 85, and also getting closer. And I just went with that. I gave that a go, and it worked really, really well. And I'm now firmly in the camp that you don't need a 7200. So when I was shooting, say before listening to Tyler, I basically shot with 3 lenses on my Nikon. It would be, what was that? The 14-24, the 24-70, and 70-200. And I loved those lenses. But I felt as though really they weren't helping me progress as a photographer, because a 7200, again, only my opinion, but it can make you lazy as a photographer, because what it does is it makes you tempted just to stand far away from the action and just zoom in. And ultimately, when you look at a photograph taken on a 7200 compared to the same moment taken on a 35mm, where you're physically much, much closer, the 35mm shots have just that intimacy. It's like if we go, let's just have a look at some of these documentary images. So that was actually on an 85mm. If we now look at, say, this shot here, now this was on a 35mm, really, really close. And the other thing that I should mention, actually, so let me just demonstrate, one of the other reasons that I really like the Sony, this isn't, what I'm going to show you now, it's not purely for the Sony, but you can do, lots of cameras have this, but is the flippy screen. So how you can flip out the screen like this, because what that enables me to do is to put the screen like that, as you can see, so it's away from the camera, but shoot at an arm's length. And I'm looking at the back of the screen, not the viewfinder. So that means that I can get really close to someone. This could be somebody's head and my camera is there, well, not that close there, but I'm not that close. I'm at arm's length away. So it lets me get even closer without being right on top of someone, because I can compose and take shots by looking at the screen rather than through the EVF. So the flippy screen, again, is being like something that I found really useful. And that is exactly what I did when I took this shot. So you can see, I feel as though this shot has an intimacy about it because it is taken so close. Now, if that was taken on the 7200, don't get me wrong, I still like it, but I just don't think that shot would have the same feel to it. It wouldn't have that intimate feeling. And I feel as though that's important to the way that I work. Again, that would have been on the 35mm, 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 35mm. You'll see the pattern. 35mm, 35mm. 85, but you can see just the sheer quantity of imagery which when it comes to the documentary stuff, which is taken on a 35, it's a big number. So yeah, so they're all my lenses. Let's see if we've got any questions. This is an interesting question. Do I take multiple exposures on a wedding day? No, I don't. Not because I don't like multiple exposures, because on a Sony you can't do them. So the choice is taken away from me. Lee has asked, do you shoot manual focus for the reception dance floor shots using zone focus? I do shoot manual focus sometimes, yes. The reason being is because sometimes if it's really dark, then it can be hard for the camera to focus. Now, the Sony A9 is very good at focus, I must admit. But certainly when I was on the Nikon, I would I would very often shoot reception with manual focus. And I would tend to sort of put my hand out like this, focus on my hand, and then just know that any shot that I take has to be that sort of distance away. And I'd probably shoot at something like f8 to make sure that I wasn't going to struggle with my focus. I should see. So it's difficult for me just to pick out some of these questions. So this is Leah's asked, what are my thoughts on the Canon 5D? Is that Mark IV? I'm not very good at Roman numerals. This is the thing. I don't really know anything about equipment that is equipment that I don't use. I don't have any interest in reading camera reviews or anything like that. The sheer fact is that I'm really happy with the cameras and lenses that I use now. So because of that, I've no interest in looking at other lenses and other cameras. So unfortunately, I can't really help you, I'm afraid. I'm sure it's great, but I don't know anything about it because I'm not really interested, as I said at the beginning, in gear. I would be if I thought my cameras now hold me back. I feel as though I can achieve more with another camera, but the cameras that I'm using, for me, just do everything that I want. I mean, there is a Sony A9 II. I don't know what the difference is. I've not even looked into it for the pure fact that I've got no interest in upgrading. Again, this is a good question from Pratik. What are your thoughts on shooting weddings with crop sensor camera? Go for it. Go for it. Honestly, I mean, if you think, when I first started shooting weddings in 2006, I was using a Nikon D70, which had a 6 megapixel sensor. Now, as well as that, you couldn't really go above ISO 800. Certainly 1600, it's going to be really noisy. But at the time, that camera was pretty revolutionary and I loved using it. Now, if I was to use it now, obviously I think it's from the dark ages. And I have made a video on my channel where I used a Nikon D70 at a wedding recently. I was second shooting it. Well, it wasn't one of my weddings. I did it as a bit of a challenge to myself. But the point of all this is, that was a perfectly capable camera of shooting weddings. And that in 2006. So in theory, there's nothing wrong with using that now. So, but a crop sensor camera that you buy now will be light years ahead of, that Nikon D70. So yeah, I don't get hung up, honestly. Don't get hung up on thinking your gear isn't good enough, because if you bought anything in the past 5 years, it's going to be good enough. I dare say you could even probably shoot on an iPhone and it would be better than, say, the camera that I started shooting my weddings on in 2006. So yeah, I hope that helps. So if I'm missing questions, I do apologize. I think that's most of them. Right, so the next thing to talk about is probably why a lot of you have become aware of me and my work is off-camera flash. So this is something I like to talk about. So the speed lights that I use now are Godox speed lights. My favorite, I have the Godox V860s. I've got 3 of these. As well as I have 2 Godox AD200s. Now, don't want to break it. I nearly had 1 Godox AD200. Speed lights, they have lots of buttons on the back. I don't know what they do. To me, a speed light is a box, light comes out of it, and we change the power of that light. That's it. As soon as you start thinking of off-camera flash in those terms, I think everything starts becoming easier. I say, if you look at the back of this speed light and look at all these buttons, you could get lost. And I haven't got a clue what they do. I'm sure it does lots of things, but all I want from this is for it to spit light out and me to control the power of that light. That's all I want to be able to do. So when you're like thinking about speed lights and which to buy and which is the best, they're all really much of a muchness when you start thinking about them in those terms. And every shot that I take is basically with these speed lights, and all I'm doing is triggering it so that light comes out. I'm not using any of the other functions. So hopefully that helps from a kickoff. I always say this on my workshops: just strip it back, take all the difficult buttons and make it everything that makes it feel complicated, take it all away. Just see it as being a box that light comes out of. That's it. And say, as soon as you start thinking those terms, I feel like everything becomes much easier. Now, the reason that I prefer the V860 to the AD200 is purely due to size and the practical thing that this is harder to put in my bag because it's bigger. So I do have two of these, which I have with me on a wedding day, but they stay in the car. I have two that are always in my bag. And I say, but those two are the V860s, purely because they are a bit smaller, but it's just the fact that you can basically turn them. This is more of a traditional speed light. So yeah, Godox V860s with the AD200. Now the other thing, obviously, there's two other really important elements that we need to talk about when it comes to off-camera flash. One is the trigger. Now my favourite trigger, I recently broke. When I was on a shoot and my camera got really hot, as did the trigger. I tried to take it off and all the hot shoe adapter ripped off. Not good. But that trigger was a Godox, can I remember it? Pro 2 R2. And that I thought was more or less the perfect trigger. Now, I do have a replacement one of those. I don't have it with me at the moment, but that is, I think, the best trigger you can buy. But what I also have is the Godox X Pro. This is a really nice trigger as well. There is a reason that I prefer the the R2 Pro 2 compared to this. And it's basically, I won't go into too much detail about it, but it's oftentimes when I'm shooting speeches and my reception lighting, I'm using three really speed lights off camera at any one time, but sometimes I only want to use two of those at any one time. So I've got three speed lights set up, but I don't want all three on. I want to be able to turn one off and turn one on really quickly. And the Pro 2 R2 trigger allows you to do that with just a quick double tap of a button, whereas the X Pro, you have to press a button, spin the wheel, press it again. It's just a bit what we would call faffy. So yeah, they all do the same job. So if I was going to recommend one trigger, it would be the Godox Pro 2 R2, which to my knowledge is only available from Adorama in the US. This is a brilliant one though as well, the X Pro. And the other one, which I've just bought, because this does offer the ability to double tap and turn speed lights on and off, is the X2T. Again, by Godox. The other advantage of this, if this is something you want to be able to do, is you can put a speed light on top of this, so you can have a speed light on your camera as well as shooting off camera. So they're the speed light triggers that I have and recommend. But say if I'm going to recommend one, the Pro 2 R2. Again, before we get onto the modifiers, which is the really, really important bit, let's just see how we're doing with questions. Do you prefer modifying your speed light like grids or a softbox in terms of telling stories through your images? Good question, Pratik. And the answer to me, 100% grids. That softboxes are beautiful, but not for documentary. The way that I shoot. Again, let me just always drop that in. Hi, Rick. Hi from Vancouver. Hi from the UK. Sorry, yeah, David has also just made a good point here that your X Pro trigger will have to be the Sony model if you're shooting with a Sony body. Correct. So that's why I said it was X Pro. I'm using the X Pro S because obviously I'm shooting with Sony. If you're shooting with Nikon, I think is it an X Pro N? I assume it is. But yes, you do need to buy the trigger that is related to your camera. Question here from Martin. Can't remember if you told us on your workshop, do you leave your cameras on eye detection or single point focus? And yeah, so let's just talk about this actually. My camera is always, firstly, I use back button focus. So I'm sure many of you are aware of what back button focus does. If not, I won't go into any detail here, but do have a look at it. But basically, in a nutshell, what back button focus allows you to do is your shutter button, which traditionally you'll be used to half pressing, full pressing to take a shot, half press, full press. It takes away the focus function from the front button, from your shutter button. So you don't press this button here to focus. What you do is you focus with the button on the back. So you'll hold the camera like this, focus with your thumb, and then all this button does here now is take a shot. That's basically back button, and I find it really useful because what it means is you can hold. I always use this in combination with continuous autofocus, and that's key because once you get your focus point, so say we've got a situation here where the bride and groom are walking down the aisle. So you've got the groom here, and your bride is walking down the aisle here. If you put your focus point here on the bride, you can then keep your focus point on the bride. So you just keep your finger down on your back button, on this button, and it will continually have the bride in focus. So all you're having to concentrate on then is literally pressing the shutter, rather than half press, full press, half press, full press. Because when you're trying to do half press, full press like that, your concentration is on the focus. It's not so much on composition. So when you're using back button, you can get your focus point on a moving subject and then just lock it on, and then just concentrate on pressing the shutter when the moment is good. So that's why I use back button focus. And yeah, so in answer to Martin's question, I always use it in AFC. I don't actually use eye autofocus all that much, to be honest. On the A9, I think it's unique to the A9, use something called real-time tracking, which basically will allow you to focus on a object or a person, whatever it may be, and as long as you keep your finger pressed down on the back button, wherever that person moves, it will always stay locked onto them. But that is, I think, a unique quality of the A9 compared to others, so it might not answer your question very well, but that's how I shoot. So Robert's asked, what was the name of the other documentary wedding photographer you got your lens selection from? Oh, Tony's answered. Thank you, Tony, for answering that. Yeah, it's Tyler Working. So let me just press this. So there's the name. If you want to go and give Tony a follow, by the way, she's got a brilliant channel. I don't know if you can actually click on that name, but yeah, she's a wedding photographer. We work together loads, and you can go and follow her channel as well. Good question here from Octave Orchestra. Any specific profile you prefer? Not really. One thing I should mention as well, so I always like to shoot in manual white balance, so that's something else to bear in mind. I shoot at a warmer white balance than reality, and what I mean by that is I don't think that the real life correct white balance is often the most aesthetically nice to look at white balance. So I tend to shoot with my Sony most of the day on a warmer white balance of around 5,500 to 6,000 Kelvin. When I was shooting Nikon, I shot around 6,000 to 6,500 Kelvin. Because, as I say, that gives my images out of camera a warmer look that I personally feel is nicer. There's nothing wrong with whatever white balance you want to shoot in, but yeah, for me, a warmer white balance is nicer. And I say on my Sony, between 5,500 and 6,000 Kelvin, and with Nikon, it was about 6,000 to 7,000 Kelvin. Now, bearing in mind, if you're shooting RAW, which I assume most of us are, I always shoot in RAW, you can always change your white balance in post, but I try and get it as close as I can to where I want it to be in camera. Let's just see. Oh, really lovely comment here from Robert. Hi from Romania. Neil, congratulations on your work. Thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate that. Right, so this is a really important bit now. We're going to talk about modifiers. And the reason that modifiers are so important, I feel, is that the difference between a good off-camera flash photograph and a bad off-camera flash photograph is often down to how well we control the spill of the light. So let me just share my screen again, because this is really important. If you want to, let me just, one second. Right, so these are still images from a video which I made, which again is on my channel, so you can go back and look at this. But this is a demonstration of how and why modifiers are so basically so required and so needed if you want to be able to control the spill of the light. So this was the whole point of this exercise is I wanted to I wanted to try and only hit the X, and I've got an off-camera speed light around 6 or 10 foot away from the wall, and I say what I'm wanting to do is basically control the light so that it was only hitting the X and it wasn't giving me all this spill around the wall. So this is taken with one off-camera flash speed light zoomed out at 24mm. Now you can zoom your speed lights in and out. So in theory, what that makes you think is if you used to zoom in your, say on your speed light, you can zoom in to say 200mm. In theory, that would make you think, okay, I'll just zoom the speed light in and then we'll just hit this area. So let's see what happened when I tried that. That is zoomed in at 200mm. Now don't get me wrong, it's better, but look at all this spill. Now, if you were taking a photograph of a bride and groom, and this is the bride and groom here, and we want to try and be really careful about where we're actually hitting with our light, then we're going to make a right mess of this image because the light is spilling all over the place. Again, so that's no good. So what I then did is added on a grid. Now, I'm going to show you the grids in a second. That's what one grid did. Let's add on 2 grids. That's 2 grids. So you can already see now why it's impossible to take a good, well-lit off-camera flash portrait, assuming that you want to control the spill of the light, which oftentimes we do. It's impossible if you're not going to use modifiers, because we can't achieve that without a modifier. It's literally impossible. This was now with the mag sphere on top. So you can see that's with 2 grids, nothing else, 2 grids and a sphere. And you can see how the edges become much blurred. It's a much softer blend between the light and the shadow. Now this is with a snoot, which I'm going to show you these pieces of equipment in a second. This was with, a snoot which is basically at level 1. Again, I'm going to demonstrate this to you in a second. And that's when it's zoomed in. But look at the difference now between the spill of the light. It's massive. And that is with a grid, I think it was, and a snoot. I mean, and we've done it. We've achieved what we wanted to achieve there. So that is what modifiers do. So let me just show you those modifiers now. And I love them. So these are all MagMod equipment that I use. So this is a grid. And the great thing about MagMod modifiers is just how quick and easy they are to use. So we take our speed light. That's it. It's on. And you can see, let's just see. So bare speed light with the grid on. And that little 1 second action will basically take us from there to there in a second. So if you want to control that spill even more, let's get another grid and put 2 on. And that is what's going to take us to there. So quick. But it really does make the difference. You basically can't have a controlled off-camera flash portrait if you're not using modifiers. So I have 4 grids in my bag. And again, what's great about these is MagMod basically stands for magnet modifier. So they've all got magnets in. They're small. They're, just chuck them in your bag. They'll last you for years. So I have 4 of those. And when I show you some of my creative portraits, it'll make more sense when you see it in reality. I have as well 2 snoots. I don't really use a snoot very often, if I'm being honest, because there's not really often a need to use a snoot. It has been to the point where it's like a gun like that. So you can be really, really careful about that light. I say that this is, for wedding photography, it's rare that you'd need to use a snoot, but it's really, really useful to have it for that odd occasion where you may do that. But for me, the grids are the thing. They are absolutely invaluable. So I think someone asked a question before about, do I prefer softbox or grids? Grids for me, for 2 reasons. One, that they limit the spill of the light, and that's what I'm often looking for. I'm trying to limit the spill, but also because they're so tiny, you can just chuck them in your bag and they take up no space whatsoever. I also have as well various gel holders, and I use different colors in the gels for creative effects, which again I'll go on to demonstrate. The mag sphere, which I mentioned before, is this. And again, as you saw, let's just share the screen again. So that's two, let me get this right. That's two grids without a sphere, and that's the sphere. So that's the difference. You can just see it just softens that light. It also takes away some of the flash power as well, but for portraits, the sphere is really nice. So I hope that makes sense. So let's just break off for questions again. Leah said, long live MagMod. Indeed, yeah. Question from The Real Deal. Do you have an assistant during a wedding shoot? Not really, no. Oftentimes I'll have a second shooter, but they do their own thing. I mean, most weddings I'll tend to shoot on my own. And if I have got somebody else with me, I tend to do my thing. They tend to do their thing. So it's not really an assistant that I have. It's a second shooter. And I've basically just been brought up, if you like, in the world of wedding photography to do everything on my own. And I've just got used to that, to be honest. I didn't end up shooting with anybody else at one of my weddings for at least, I mean, I started in 2006. I think the first time I second shot a wedding or had a second shooter on mine was maybe 15. So like, 9 years I was shooting on my own with nobody else. So now I do have second shooters, but they are a second shooter, which is very different from an assistant. Excellent. Thank you, Robert. I'm trying to share as many of the comments as I can. Tyler's Kansas City, correct. Yeah. There's 20. Oh, brilliant. Honestly, Tyler is he's an amazing photographer, but his philosophy, the way he teaches, I just love it. I mean, he is extremely documentary. The rules that he imposes on himself are really hardcore. But for me, like, I don't go that far, but I just love his philosophy. He's a phenomenal teacher of wedding photography. Wedding Raja, again, sorry if I got the name pronunciation wrong. Can you let us know about the lighting accessories? Hopefully I've just done that, yeah. Let's just think of that, answer that question as well. Excellent. So again, if you've not done so, if I could ask you to hit the like button, I'd massively appreciate that, if that's all right, please. So let's now talk. We're going to get to the fun stuff in a minute, where we're going to show you some of all the creative portraits, which I'm hoping that most of you probably tuned in for. So the next thing to say, actually, let's talk through some of our creative portraits, and as we do that, I'm going to show you the crystals and things that I've used to create those portraits. So hopefully everything so far has made sense in terms of just to recap, in case anybody's joined us late. The majority of a wedding day, 9% of a wedding day, I shoot in a documentary fashion. In other words, I'm shooting things as they happen without having any influence on those things happening. And that's important to the way that I want to work. I want to provide my bride and grooms with a set of images that not only are they going to love, but also that they want to look back on their wedding day and not remember me. That's what I'm trying to achieve. I don't want them to look back on a wedding day and think, oh, like, we love our photographs. It's a shame it took like 3 hours out away from our day for us to get them. I want to do the opposite. I want to give them a set of images that they love, but they don't remember me being there. And the biggest compliment I can ever receive, which I'm sure is the same for any documentary wedding photographer, is, we didn't know you took that. We forgot that happened. We didn't even know you were there for that. If I can hear that after a wedding day, then I feel as though I've done the job that I set out to do. So that was what we talked about at the beginning. I then obviously showed you my documentary images. Primarily, I'm shooting on the 35mm lens most of the day. The other lens that I use all the time is the 85mm. And I'm shooting documentary close. I'm always wanting to be close to the action. The last thing I want to do is be far away, hid in the corner, as I used to, going back a few years when I used to have the 70-200. And obviously we've then talked about the speed lights. So the big takeaway from that, in my opinion, is start to see your speed lights as just being a box that light comes out of. That's it. You don't need to worry about anything else. Forget all the complicated buttons on the back. Forget it all. It just complicates things. And I've obviously talked you through the modifiers, and hopefully, I've demonstrated why modifiers are so useful. So now let's go into the creative portraits. And I feel as though this is the more exciting bit, I would say, for a stream like this. So I'm going to go through a series of pictures now. Please do keep on asking me questions, and I'll keep on breaking off to answer those. but I'll talk you through how each of these was created. So quick question here, I've just seen here. I wish I could come to India. That'd be amazing. Maybe in the future, when all this situation, as we call it on YouTube, is over and done with. Tori's asked, do you ever use a mag beam? I do own the mag beam. I've never used it to project light. I've only ever used it to project. A mag beam has two uses. One is where you project light to make that light travel further so you can have your speed light outside of the frame. The other use which people use it for, which is what I've used it for, is to project like a pattern onto a surface. And for those you use what's called, I think they call them gobos, I think I'm right in saying. Basically, let's just see, this is my Magmod wallet of gels. So in here, you can project like a pattern like that. Does that make more sense? We'll put it here, and it projects the pattern onto the wall. That's the reason I've used the mag beam, not for the other purpose. I should do, to be honest, but I haven't done so far. So let's just take that away, and then let's go to share screen again. So this photograph was taken in completely natural light. So the bride here, this was from a workshop, she is facing a window. And the light was really harsh. Now, I like harsh light, especially if we're indoors, because what that means, when we're exposing for the bride, it means that everything else in the frame is going to go really underexposed. So the brighter and harsher the light, the darker everywhere else is going to become in the frame. And that is something that over time you'll keep your eye looking for this, and you'll start to become attracted to it, because harsh light can seem like not easy light, but when you know what to do when you see the harsh light, you'll start wishing you saw it more. So harsh light is good. Now the key thing, one of the biggest lessons that I can tell you, is that when you're shooting in conditions like this, you want to expose for the brightest part of the photograph. Because what you never want to do, and this is what I always try and tell myself, you don't ever want to lose highlights. You know, if you take a photograph and you look on the back of your camera and you'll see areas of maybe flashing red, and that basically means that you've lost the highlight, and you can't recover those. Once you've lost the highlight in a photograph, it's gone forever. It just basically means there's no detail left in that area of the frame, and that can ruin a photograph, to put it bluntly. So the last thing you want to do is blow out highlights. So because of that, expose for the brightest thing in the photograph. Now, if we look at this one again, the brightest part of the photograph here was not actually the bride's face. It was her dress. And the reason being that her dress was slightly closer to the light source, which was the window, which is the window light coming in from here. Sorry, coming in from here. But also because the dress is a more reflective surface than skin. So I didn't expose for the bride's face, I exposed for the dress here. And that's the important lesson. So again, when we do that, everything else comes very dark. Hopefully this is all making sense. Now, when you have a very dark space, such as this, that to me is an invitation to then put something in front of my lens. And that's where the crystals and things like that can come into it. Now, again, let me just stress, what I'm going to talk you through now, all the portraits are creative portraits and all that stuff, is a tiny, tiny part of what I do on a wedding day. I deliver from each wedding around 500 or 600 images to my bride and grooms. I would say of those, maybe 30 will be portraits, and of those 30, maybe 5 or 6 will be creative portraits. So that as a percentage is a tiny, tiny part of the wedding day. So again, I always want to make that clear. I'm not spending all day running around shooting through crystals. It's a tiny, tiny part of the wedding day, probably just a few minutes, if that. But those shots are then what I show on my Instagram for the reasons that I said at the beginning of the stream, which again, if you just joined us, is because these images will often do quite well online, say on your Instagram and things like that. It will help you to stand out amongst a very saturated market of wedding photographers. So if you'd like me, you're shooting documentary for most of the day, and you might show some beautiful documentary images on your Instagram, The problem is, so is everybody else. So it's hard for you to stand out. Whereas if you wanted to take a similar approach to me, which is to go down the route of showing the creative portraits, even though it is such a tiny part of what you actually do on the wedding day, I feel it will help you stand out more. That's the reason I do all this. So that being said, let's now show you some. So the shot I've just showed you, I can't remember exactly which. Actually, I think I can. So the crystals that I'm going to talk you through now were bought off Amazon. And I just buy random stuff off Amazon in the hope that it's going to give me, a cool look. So let's talk about this photograph. Now, I think with this photograph, this is obviously all the crystal on this left-hand side. And the crystal I believe I use for that one is this. And you might be able to see, I don't think you'll be able to, but it has colour within that crystal. Same as these are my other ones. These are called teardrop crystals. And basically, just go onto Amazon, search for teardrop crystal. You'll find loads of stuff like this. They're very, very cheap. And my advice is just buy 3 or 4 different ones because they're so cheap, and just have a play with them when you get them and see which one you prefer. Now, to use these, I've not got the 35mm lens on this camera. I can't have it because I'm filming with it. What you're looking at is me on a 35mm lens. So I'm just going to put on the 85mm just to demonstrate. So I don't use the crystals, by the way, I only tend to use with the 35mm lens. So I wouldn't do this because this is an 85mm lens, but this is just to demonstrate how I use them. You basically want to put the crystals really close to your lens, and I'm talking like that far away, virtually touching. And that will give you this really cool effect. Now, one thing to bear in mind is you may, depending on the situation, you may have to light the crystal. Because in this situation that I'm showing you here, obviously the natural light is coming in, hitting the bride from a window. I'm cutting out that window from the composition, and I'm putting this in front of my lens. Now, bear in mind that unless this has a light source on it, you're not going to see the effect. So oftentimes what I'll do is I'll either pull back the curtain so that this is getting light on it as well, or even just use my phone at the same time to light this up. So you may need a light source on it. That's just the one thing to bear in mind. But let's just look at some of the other images which I think are with crystals. Again, so these are all slightly different, and though I can't remember exactly which crystal they've been used with, but they've all been taken with a crystal right in front of the lens. Now, this is a raw file, and that is the edited version. So, and this was with a prism. I don't actually use a prism anymore. I've not actually got one in my bag anymore. But yeah, prisms can be cool as well. This one was taken with... So, I'm actually only shooting here through, I believe, 2 candles. Even though it looks like there's loads of candles in there. And that was taken with this crystal. Because when you put this right in front of your camera lens, and again, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about right in front, like that. Oh, so I just want to make this to drop on my laptop and smash it. So like that close, really close. And what that does is it gives this weird effect of magnifying whatever's in front. So, not magnifying, sorry, like multiplying. So rather than seeing one of the candles, we then suddenly see lots of different candles. Same effect there, the exact same technique. With this photograph, this was taken in a venue which had very tall sort of pillars, posts in the middle, and those posts had fairy lights wrapped around them. So again, there's virtually nothing done with this image in post. That effect all happened through me just putting the crystal in front of the lens. Again, it would have been on a 35mm lens. For some reason, don't ask me why, the focal length of 35mm by far works the best when you're shooting through things like this. I don't know why that is, but it is a big thing to bear in mind. If you try this on an 85mm, it's going to become too blurred, the effect. If you try it on anything wider, like a 24mm or wider, you're going to be able to tell what it is. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that you want to take these shots at a very wide aperture. So if you can, trying to take these shots at, say, f1.8 or f2, something like that, because again, that's going to blur whatever's in front of the lens. As soon as you start shooting these sort of images at f4, f5, 6, you're going to be able to tell what it is in front of the lens, and it's just going to lose that effect. So bear those things in mind. You want to shoot through things on a 35mm lens, and also you want to shoot at wide apertures. So let's just jump off and see if we've got any questions. Good question from Lee. Lee's come up with some good questions tonight. Could you use a speed light to light the crystal? Yes, you could. You could. The only reason I spoke about using my phone, again, is being practical, because my phone is often on me. And because of that, it's just handy. It's just always in my pocket. But yeah, you could do that with a crystal. I have done that before you could do that with a speed light, and I have done that before. Just bear in mind, if you do that you want the speed light to be at very low power, because otherwise it might be too strong. But yes, great question. And yes, you can. Question here from, again, apologies. I feel awful when I come to pronunciation. Gorav. I recognize you from Instagram. Excellent. Thank you for joining me. Yeah, I always appreciate your comments. How do you go on getting those perfect poses of the subjects in your photos? I really appreciate that question, and I really appreciate the insinuation of the perfect poses. I'll talk about that a bit later on. But yeah, great question, and thank you for joining us. What about your famous silhouette with red background? Not sure which one that one is. If you have to drop it in the comments which one you're referring to. Can you show the raw photo of the last photo? Unfortunately, I don't have all these things to hand, unfortunately. It might be on a YouTube video somewhere, possibly. I can't remember. Yeah, we'll get a question here about the fractal. We'll get to that. Can you get rid of raccoon eyes in post? I'm not sure. That will probably be a lighting thing, I'm imagining. I'm not really sure exactly what it is that means. I'd need to see an example. Right, I think that's most. Question here from Nicholas. Do you print your work on your own? No, I don't do any in-house printing. I send my work away if I want it to be printing. In the UK, I use a company called either SimLab, who are excellent, or Loxley. Both of them really good printers. Question here. You must surely set up photos outside the church. No, not really. Unless I'm asked for it. I will tend to do group photographs later in the day, because again, let's go back to the documentary stuff. Let's just go back to, because I always like questions that are relating to sort of the documentary element. So when it comes to, let's just open these. So I'm struggling at the minute to use the trackpad, because my drone, I was out yesterday with the drone and tried to catch it in midair, which I've done a few times. Sliced me bad, so I've got a plaster now on my finger, which means that it doesn't work on the trackpad, so I'm trying to use different fingers. So let's just go back to these. So let's just go, some of these will be taken outside church, and let's find an example of what I'm trying to refer to. For example, right, so, I'm not sharing the screen, this helps. So this photograph, for example, took place within a few minutes of the ceremony finishing. Now, for me, some of the best time on a wedding day to capture real moments full of emotion that are authentic and just basically have all those feel-good vibes come at this point of the wedding day. So the bride and groom have just got married, they've left church, and then I always say to my couples, you're the superstars on the wedding day. Everyone wants to come out and congratulate you, give you a massive hug. Not at the moment. In the future, they're going to want to give you a massive hug, kisses and stuff like that. And the moments you get then are amazing. Or often, again, normal times, they'll be absolutely amazing. So what I don't want to do is when we finish, after everyone's come out of the church, is basically then say, right, can we go and do a group photograph over here? I'm going to take the bride and groom away. Because what that is doing is killing the moments. It's basically stopping the moments dead in their tracks. And I don't want to do that. So I like to keep the bit at church, assuming we're going on to a reception venue, purely for the moments. Just let the bride and groom, let all the guests come over to them, big hugs, get the moments and shots like this, because I think that these shots are going to become, so important to the bride and groom. in the future. So this is another one which was taken at that exact moment, after the ceremony's just finished. So again, I try and keep that moment, that part of the day, pretty sort of natural. I don't want to get involved. Now, sometimes the bride and groom may ask for things outside the church. That's cool. I'll do whatever my bride and grooms want me to do. But that would be them instigating it rather than me. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. Yeah. So yeah, good comment. Someone some form of photo prosperity. Exactly, they do, and if they do, no problem whatsoever. I'll take those. But I say for me, I would want my bride and groom to ask me for that specifically rather than me instigate things as a photographer. Again, no right or wrong. It depends how you want to work. If you maybe think, I prefer to take some more formal photographs outside the church, go for it, honestly. I think one of the biggest thing we all need to remember is that we're individuals, and we should strive to create our own style. What we never want to do is try and become somebody else, because we'll only ever be a poorer version of that other person. So I think it's really important that we try and retain our uniqueness and create our own style. So again, do not think that what I'm saying is correct. It's just the way that I do things. Right, let's just go back to the creative portraits. Where were we up to? So again, another crystal. Same again. This is with a prism. Prism can give you 3 versions, which is quite cool. Another crystal. Another one. So all these are crystals. Right, we've got a few more like little behind the scenes shots now. Some of these have been in my videos, but I'll just talk you through. So with this one, for example, this is a good example of me seeing something that I would call a trigger. And what I mean by that is, if I see fairy lights like this, mentally, I already know what it is I'm going to do. So remember I said before that you want to expose for the brightest area of a photograph. In this instance, the brightest area of the photograph is these fairy lights here. So by exposing for those fairy lights, everything else again is going to go very underexposed. And that is going to basically make the scene look completely different to what we see with our eyes. One thing that is always important to remember is that our eyes, the human eye, has a very, very large dynamic range. And what that means is we're oft in real time, we're obviously seeing the detail in the darkest of shadows, and we're seeing the detail in the brightest of bright areas. A camera can't see like that. So if this is our dynamic range, a camera's dynamic range is something more like this. So if a camera sees a bright area, it can't see any of this detail anymore. All this goes really dark. Likewise, if we want to expose for the shadow area, all this is going to go overexposed, because a camera can't see enough. I say our eyes are like this, a camera's like this, and that's good. That's good for us as photographers, because we can take advantage of the camera's limitation. So when you start thinking and seeing as a camera sees, that's when you're going to start seeing the potential in different scenes. And that's exactly what happened with this photograph. I saw this scene like a camera and thought, when I expose for these bright lights here, the rest of the scene, in other words, the background here, it's going to go very underexposed. And all then I have to do is use a speed light to light up the bride and groom. Because remember, if I don't use a speed light, the bride and groom are going to be in darkness. And that speed light has a grid on. And then we ended up taking this photograph. So what you see in here, these are the fairy lights from here. And obviously, as I say, the bride and groom would have been in complete darkness, but I've lit them with a speed light, which you see over here. And that speed light has a grid on. The reason being that I want to limit the spill. Do you see the fall off of the light between the faces here and the bottom here, which is in darkness? If I didn't use a grid, the grid would have been lighting all of the couple. And it just wouldn't have had that sort of that subtlety. It would have just looked a bit messy, because it also probably would have hit the background as well. Because as you see, when we look back, there's this post here. And the grid, if you didn't use a grid, the light would have hit that post, which is not what you want. So yeah, that's, again, it's a trigger. See fairy lights or bright things, expose for them. Exactly the same here. So what are the brightest things in this scene? It's obviously these ceiling lights, these wall lights here. So this is what the human eye sees. If you or I walk down that corridor, we would see this. That's not what the camera sees. When we expose for this, the camera basically can't see the detail in the background anymore, and we can take advantage of that. So I knew that if I exposed for these ceiling lights, wall lights, then everything else would go virtually pitch black. So I thought if I put apart from the ceiling lights in the background here, obviously because they're quite bright as well. So if I knew that if I put a couple here and I lit them, then that could look quite cool. And then we got this. So although that is the most boring corridor in the world, we can make it look really interesting by simply exposing for the brightest thing in the frame. And this is what you can use, this sort of technique, to make even the most boring of locations look really different. So I'm really pleased that our cameras have such a poor dynamic range, because that is what helps. Now the bottom half of this photograph was created by me reflecting the top half of the photograph into the bottom half by using my mobile phone. So to demonstrate that, again, it would have been done on a 35mm. I don't use this technique on an 85mm lens because it won't work. But I'll do something like that. So it's basically going to reflect the top half of the photograph into the bottom half of the frame. And you want to, again, same thing, for this technique, do it on a 35mm lens, put the phone right up against the lens like that, and shoot at a wide aperture. So that would have been taken, I imagine, at say f2 or something like that. But again, it just shows you how you can make the scene look completely different. Now, bear in mind, if I didn't use a modifier, you can see the speed light in the background there. If I didn't use a modifier, the light would have hit the doorway, which wouldn't have been as nice. So I used a snoot in this example so that the light was only hitting this circle here. So do you see why the modifier was so useful? I didn't want it to hit this reflective door or this one over here, because it would have spoilt the effect. So again, the MagMod snoot was absolutely invaluable. So let's just move on now to this one. So this obviously is a very busy wedding reception scene. But hopefully what I've just said, try and look at this scene now like a camera would look at it. In other words, let's pretend that you're looking at this scene when you're exposing for the bright lights. Because this is a room that is full of people, obviously. It's also full of tables and chairs, and all that ultimately is just a bit messy. We don't want that. But always remember that we know that if we expose for the bright lights, then we're not going to see any of that clutter. We're not going to see the tables and chairs. So what I did with this one is I put a bride and groom here. I lit them from here, from the left, with I believe it was maybe 1 or 2 grids. And I also lit them from behind as well. Now that speed light was placed behind the bride and groom. But the main thing to remember is I exposed for the bright lights in the scene. And that gave us this. So it looks completely different to what that picture looked like to the human eye. But it's very simple. The hardest thing when it comes to photographs like this is not, and this is something that I always stress in my workshops, the hardest thing is not taking these photographs, it's seeing them. It's seeing the potential for them in your head. But once you start to see the world underexposed and you start to look out for the bright lights and expose for those bright things, honestly, a whole world of possibilities will start to become open to you. It's just a question of training your eye to see the world like this. But once you do, it becomes very instinctive. You know, once you get to this point where you're just looking out for these things, you don't really become conscious of it in the future. It just happens instinctively, and that is when you're going to start to see loads of potential. And as I say, I absolutely promise you that the taking of these photographs is not the difficult part. It's just seeing it in the first place. Because once you understand that the speed light is just a box, light comes out of it, and all we're doing is controlling that light with our modifiers, that's it. I am not a good technical photographer. I'm just not. I don't understand the laws of physics very well. I have no real interest in knowing what all the buttons on my camera do. What I'd like to feel I'm okay at is seeing the world in a bit of a different way. But again, that can be taught. I do it on my workshops. You can learn that. And then once you've learnt it, it becomes so much easier, because people look at my work and sometimes think, how do you do that? But once you start to see the world in a different way, honestly, I promise you, you'll start to do the exact same thing. It is not difficult. It just takes experience and practice. And just wherever you are now, look around the room. What's the brightest thing in the room? Expose for that in your head. What does it look like? You've got to try training yourself to do this, like mental gymnastics, I suppose. All right, just go back, look at some of the questions. Leah's asked, did I use a prism in the last photo? Yes, I did. So I would have put my camera right up against the lights that you saw in the previous part of the photo, right up against the lights, probably here, and I would have reflected some of them back in the bottom half, because I don't think that this bit here, I mean, this is old, this photograph, but I wouldn't have seen, you wouldn't have seen that bottom bit, to be honest, if I didn't use a prism. So I must have used a prism. Good question again, Leah. In crop sensors must have 20. Oh, this is good. I've not been asked this before. In crop sensors must have 25mm instead of 35mm for crystals. Yes, because a 24mm on a crop sensor, is it 1.6? The multiplication, again, I don't know stuff like this, but I think it's something like that. I think a 24mm is a 35mm, so yeah, almost certainly yes, you want to use that on a crop sensor. Good question, that. Thank you for all the kind words, everyone. I really appreciate it. Again, sorry to be boring. If you haven't done so already, if I could please ask you to like the stream. Again, I'd massively appreciate it. It just helps get the stream out there so that more people can join. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that, if you haven't done so already, thank you. I'd really appreciate it. Got 81 people watching now, which is really cool. Thank you. Let's just move on to some others. Again, remember to keep on asking your questions. I have no problem whatsoever answering all the questions that I'm asked. I think I've got everyone at the moment. If not, please just ask again. I'm sorry to put my iPad again so I can make sure that I'm not missing anything. Right, let's go back to where we're up to. So again, you can probably tell from this one that this again is using, now this wasn't using my phone. This was actually using, this is the raw file, and this was the end image. There is a video on my channel where you can see me creating this shot. I've shot this live on a video. Can't remember what that one's called. Oh, yes, I can. It's called How to Take Creative Photographs in Natural Light, Natural Window Light, something like that anyway, but you'll find it. So you can see exactly how this photograph was taken. But this was taken, again, a 35mm. Hopefully, if you've watched for the whole stream, you'll start to see a theme here, which is that I use the 35mm for virtually everything, because it just offers me so much. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, the more you use the same prime lenses, the more that muscle memory will kick in, and you'll start to know these focal lengths inside out. You'll know exactly where to stand. You'll know exactly what effects you're going to get when you use different things in front of your lens, and it becomes so much easier. So I can't stress enough, that's the reason I think the 35mm, or using prime, is so good. Now, that photograph which you've just seen was not taken with my phone. It could have been. The phone could have done that for me, but I don't tend to use my phone anymore for that. I use this mirror instead. Again, just bought off Amazon. Just a makeup mirror. Just search for that, makeup mirror, something like that. This is cool though, because one of the sides is magnified and one of the sides is like a normal reflection. And it also has lights. You can tell, probably not, that these, it's too bright in here. But the lights on the side here can turn on and off. And when you look at this photograph, the blue that you see is the mirror light. But again, just to show you this technique, again, obviously, as I just said, it was taken on the 35mm lens, but this is an 85 that I'm demonstrating it on because you're watching on the 35mm. But you want to put that mirror right up against the lens like this, right up touching. And that's what's going to give you the cool reflection. Now, the reason I like using this as opposed to the phone, two reasons really. One, this is going to give you a cleaner reflection because it's just a sheer mirror. But also, because if I pick up my phone, you see it turns on, and you don't want that. But also, like an idiot, when I bought my latest phone, I bought a red case. So if I put that right against the camera, you see the red line. Not ideal. So you can take the case off. That's the easiest way of doing it, but it's just all a bit faffy. So it's just nice to have a mirror in my bag. So that's how that one was created. Let's go back. So a couple of questions here. Was it exposed to the dress? Yes. Yeah, I don't know if you were watching earlier. Great question. Was this shot exposed to the dress? Yes, it was, because the dress is the brightest part of the photograph. It may not have been here. I imagine it was. Again, the brightest thing will often be what's closest to the light source. So this was taken, so I should have said, with window light again, coming in from the left-hand side. Sorry. So this was a window here. And I've just basically moved myself to the left so that you couldn't see any of that window light, which basically then means that when exposed to the brightest area, which would have been the dress, everything else goes underexposed. Oftentimes, the brightest area will be the area that is closest to the light source. But because we had a white dress here, the brightest part wasn't Demi's skin, even though that is closer to the light source. It was the dress, because the dress is just a much more reflective surface. So hopefully that answers that question. Let's just move on. Again, this would have been, I would use my mirror now for this, but this would have been on my phone. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, you want to shoot these shots at a wide aperture, because if I would have shot this at, say, f5 or f8, you would literally see the line of the phone here. Whereas what I want to achieve is a very subtle blur between the reality and the reflection. So I would have shot this at, say, f1.8 or f2, something like that. So again, remember the rules. 35mm, wide open, and that's when you're going to get like the best effect. So again, exactly the same. One speed light behind the couple. I've actually blown out the highlights in this, so you know it's not ideal. The bride's veil here has no detail in it, so slap on the wrist. But again, the 35mm phone, exactly the same technique. And again, you just want to start train yourself to think of these things when you see them. Same thing again. Lit the bride and groom from behind, but what am I exposing for here? This, I promise you, was not the most aesthetic venue. It didn't look pretty by what we would call pretty, but people get so hung up on thinking, oh, the venues that I'm shooting at aren't beautiful. They're not really, they don't look very good. Doesn't matter. Or as long as that venue has a light in it, and you know, usually venues do have lights, you can then start to see the potential in even the most, dare I say it, boring or ugly of venue. Now, this venue wasn't ugly by any means, but you can start to see the potential. All you need is lights. And as I say, when we look at this one, I've exposed for these lights up here and these wall lights. And then all I've done is put a speed light behind the bride and groom, using a modifier again, just to limit the spill. And I've just reflected back the lights from the top half using my phone. It's really simple. But again, as I've said so many times now, these are the photographs which, if you post on your Instagram, will get attention. And when I say attention, I mean that they'll help you stand out. So I'm talking about taking these photographs from a business point of view, because we all want to stand out, and it's very, very difficult to do that in this day and age with so many wedding photographers out there. So the more that you can stand out, and taking shots like this, in my experience, is one of the best ways to stand out. That's when you will start to, you know, maybe get more inquiries and things like that. As I keep on saying, I want to stress this all the time, if anyone's just joined, this is a very small amount of the wedding day for me. This is probably taking up no more than 15 minutes out of a 12-hour day. But I tend to show these more often for the reasons that I've just said. So let's just move on. Same thing again. 30. Oh, no, I'm lying. I don't think... Yeah, no, it would have been. This will have been on a 35mm. It has to be because of the reflection. So 35mm. One speed light behind the couple. Same thing. Now this one, you may have seen this. Again, there is a video on my channel where I show you exactly how I've taken this photograph. Sorry, just get a bit of water. So this isn't a mirror on the left-hand side of the image here. This is a picture frame. Picture frames are still reflective though. You don't have to be a mirror. So this was obviously the real Demi and James. I took this on a workshop. This was the reflection of them in the picture frame. And this is a reflection from putting my mirror in front of the camera lens, which, again, 35mm. Remember the rules. And I would have lit them with a mag box, just one light here. So yeah, that was how I took that one. Just going to jump out again, see what questions we have. Good question here. Hi Neil, how you managed to take great portraits in Indian weddings, because it's very, Indian weddings are tough in terms of timings, as you do know. So let me stress, I am not spending a long time on these portraits. They probably take me, I should have made you mentioned earlier. Let's just think of a wedding day as a whole. I will basically pinch my bride and grooms for 2 sessions, ideally. So as a quick timeline, getting ready photographs, all documentary. Ceremony, all documentary. Half an hour, 45 minutes after the ceremony, all the hugs, the kisses, documentary. Then traditionally in the UK anyway, we'll take group photographs. Obviously, I always take group photographs. I don't tend to show them online, but I always take them. And then I would normally pinch my bride and groom for, say, 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. And that would be natural light photographs. So I don't get any of the speed lights out at that point, unless it's exceptional circumstances. Usually just natural light portraits of the bride and groom. They'll then go back in to see their guests, back to documentary. I'll get some detailed shots of the room, speeches, documentary, some people milling about afterwards, documentary. Then either as the sun goes down or I want to do the creative shots, that's when I'll pinch the bride and groom again for maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes again at the most. And that's when I'll take the shots that you're looking at now. So it's a quick process, but don't get me wrong as well. Remember that these shots are planned out. So when I don't just arrive at a venue and then I don't have the bride and groom with me. Right, what are we going to do? Let's have a think, looking around. When the bride and groom are sat down having their meal, that's when I'm looking around the venue and finding these shots. And I'll then think, right, okay, I'm going to pinch the bride and groom for 15 minutes at the most. I'm going to go there, I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go there. And I'm not putting that much pressure on myself to take lots. As I said, like, if I can leave a wedding day with, say, 3 creative portraits, I've done very well. Oftentimes it might only be 1. So I'm not spending a long time on them. So because I'm not spending a long time on them, I don't need a lot of time for them. So there's rarely a wedding ever when you can't have the bride and groom for 10 minutes. But out of a whole wedding day of 12 hours, I very rarely will have a bride and groom in front of me for portraits for more than half an hour out of that whole day. So, let's say an average wedding day for me is 12 hours. Half an hour of that is portraits. The rest is documentary. So it's a small, quick part of the day. Question here from Phil. Phil, you said, excuse a newbie question. No question is stupid. Let's forget about all that. Ask me whatever you want, but don't think that any question is stupid. But would you expose the sky too, say to include clouds? Yes. Because oftentimes, again, we're talking portraits here, we're not talking documentary, but if we're outside, what is often the brightest part? Remember, forget the sky, lamps, ceiling, whatever, we're exposing for the brightest part. Now, oftentimes when we go outside, the brightest part of that scene just so happens to be the sky. And if it is, that's what I'm exposing for. So yes, it's a really good question. I am often exposing for the sky for the pure fact that it is often the brightest part of the scene. So yeah, I really like that question. Thank you. Question here. Hey Neil, wedding videographer here. Hi. What's your worst videographer experience story? Thankfully, I have got one. I'm not going to get out the question, but I've not had a bad experience with a videographer for years now. Because usually the videographers that I'm working with are friends of mine. As photographers, we are often in a quite fortunate position that traditionally, not saying it's always the case, but traditionally a photographer will get booked further or earlier on in the bride and groom's process of booking their suppliers than a filmmaker, a videographer would do. So because of that, oftentimes I'm asked for recommendations as to who I would recommend when it comes to videographers. So I'm always more than happy to do that. And I tend to recommend, obviously, people who I've worked with before, who I know well. I know that we work together well. And more importantly, whose work I really think is awesome. And this 4 or 5 videographers that I do recommend. And oftentimes, because of that, I'm quite lucky that I'm working with the same people. It's not always the case. And even when it isn't the case, usually the people I'm working with are really good. And I found that the videographers over the past few years I've worked with have a similar way of working than I do, which as I do, which in other words, they want to be in the background and things like that. Having said all that, I do remember one occasion. Actually, there was one quite recently, if I'm being honest. And that was the issue that I had there is that this particular videographer, who shall not be named, wanted to set up everything. So, for example, if the bride's getting ready, he wanted the bride to look into the camera and talk into the camera. Obviously, to me, that's completely against what I'm trying to achieve. And then throughout the whole day, it was constantly stopping the bride and groom. Can you look this way? Can you do this? Can you do that? To the point where the bride and groom actually got a little bit annoyed by it and actually asked him to stop. So that wasn't really a bad experience for me. Well, it was in terms of the images. It would stop me from taking a lot of the natural images because the moments weren't happening. But yeah, that was very frustrating. But I also remember, this is going back a long time now, probably at least 10 years, working with a videographer who for some reason seemed to think that like shooting a wedding was a competition between the photographer and the videographer. And I can remember there was a couple of occasions where it was almost like, I want to stand here. No, I'm standing here. And it was awful. I mean, the thing that I will always do, whoever I'm ever working with, is say like, you know, if I'm ever in your way, let me know. And always they'll say same. And we, as soon as you set like you introduce yourself to each other, even before the day sometimes, but you just basically say, look, you know, we're both here for the bride and groom. We both want to create the best work we can for the bride and groom. Let's do it as a team. And I say I've been very fortunate that for a long, long time now, everyone that I've worked with has been really good, which is good as well, because I found as though couples wanting video is becoming a much more common thing. It used to be that maybe let's try and think, probably thinking maybe 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 5 would have a video. Now I'd say it's at least half will have a video. So it's important, obviously, you do get along with your bride, with the videographer. Question here from Barry. Hi Barry, Daniel, do you have a go-to setting which allows you to catch those off-camera flash quickly at a wedding? Yes. I mean, I don't often shoot documentary with speed lights. The only time that I would do on a wedding day is for speeches and for the first dance and reception. And that's when I won't go through. I mean, it's difficult for me to go through the whole speeches setup. I haven't mentioned yet. I mean, I know that things have been, I think, coming up on the screen about my Patreon, but I promise you that there is so much information in that Patreon. I mean, I've done 20 live streams in there now, and I've gone through everything that I can and continue to do so. We have live streams every single week. And one of the live streams that I did relatively recently is I taught through in depth. It took me 2 hours to go through with examples my exact setups for speeches and my exact setups for dancing, for various different situations. And I do have go-to settings, but I say the live stream took me 2 hours to explain them, so it doesn't take that long. But I do have go-to settings, but the go-to settings depend on the environment that I'm in, so it's difficult for me to explain there. But basically, yeah, I have 3 and 4 light setups that I use, but I know that they work in any environment. I just depends on what that environment is. But once I know, can I bounce off the ceiling and things like that, it becomes much easier. So again, if you want to have a look at that, then do please consider joining the Patreon, because there's so much information in there, which goes into much more detail than I'm going through in this stream. Question here, please provide a list of crystal and mirror purchases link, please. Again, I can do. I don't know how I can do in this stream, to be honest. What I'd say is if you go to Amazon and you search for teardrop crystals, then you're going to find these. But what Amazon also will do is they'll show you what other people have bought who have viewed this, and you'll start to go down the crystal wormhole. So the more that you search for crystals, the more you're going to find. And that's what I'd recommend that you do. So just search for teardrop crystal, and that will send you down the path. But yeah, I'll get all mine off Amazon. Oh, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. Yeah, again, I this is not like, you know, a thing, a selling thing for the Patreon, but I just trust me. If you've enjoyed what I'm giving you in this stream, trust me, it happens every single week in the Patreon. And if you do join, not only do you get to see everything we've got coming up, obviously, but you'll get the whole back catalogue, which is now, I think it's at least 50 hours. It's getting on for 60 hours of content. And I say, if you join, you get everything. And as well as that, we do these live streams all the time. And coming up in the Patreon, which I'm really excited. I mean, we do live streams every single week. And as you'll see here, not only do I host the live streams, and within those live streams, I do live editing tutorials. I will show you, I've done a stream where I've showed you every single photograph from a wedding, all the raw files and why I took what I did and my thought process. Say loads of editing tutorials. I've done critiques in there as well. We've covered so much things, so much different subjects. But as well as the live streams which I host each month, well, I host them all, but some of the live streams are me giving out the information, but we're also joined at least once a week by what I'm calling wedding industry experts. So coming up on the live stream, we've got Arno de Brown, who is an amazing creative wedding photographer. His work is stunning. He's going to come onto the live stream this Thursday. That's going to be a 2-hour live stream. He's going to be showing us how he took some of his favorite photographs. He's a MagMod ambassador. He's also a pro photo ambassador. His work is mind-blowing. And also as well, later this month, we've got Chris, who created Studio Ninja, who some of you may be aware of, to give us a demonstration of Studio Ninja. So it's not just a demonstration, it's a demonstration by the creator. So that's going to be amazing. And next month is organised as well, but my patrons don't know who that is yet, so I'm not going to disclose that. All I will say is it's going to be good. It's going to be good. Maybe another MagMod ambassador, but I'm not saying anything. So yeah, thank you for that, Joe. I really appreciate that. Oh, thank you as well to Caroline. I appreciate that. So let's move on back to the pictures. Oh, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong buttons. Oh, I was doing so well. Sorry, bear with me a second, everyone. I think we're back. Yeah, cool. This is really simple. This is just a puddle. So the photographs that you see now are reflections. Obviously, we've talked about reflection, but this is natural. That was just from a natural puddle that was on the floor. Same there as well. I did use a speed light to light the couple here. But yeah, again, we were talking before about triggers. If I see water, that means reflection. And bear in mind, you don't need a lot of water. You don't need a massive lake or like a pond like this. Just a small puddle. Even a puddle that's only a few inches wide will still give you a really good reflection. Now that's obviously that's all completely natural reflection as well. So all these images here, I've just seen a question here, was that a mirror? So no, that's a natural puddle. A real puddle, natural puddle. Just a puddle that was there. We get a lot of rain in the UK. That was a natural pond. And that's a natural lake. This is from a glass table. Now, again, on my YouTube channel, there's a video all about reflections, and you see me taking this photograph within that video. But yeah, it's just a glass table. Again, what am I... Hopefully, let's see in the chat who can be the first to say. Nick said, oi, oi. Look, well, Nick. This is for you, Nick. So let's see first in the chat. What am I exposing for here? Who's going to win? Whoever gets it right is going to get an applause. Oh, come on, chat. You let me down. I'm exposing for something here to ensure that I don't lose any highlights. Hey, Steve's got it. Steve got it correct. The dress. Look at me getting all fancy now with my effects. So yeah, the reason that I exposed for the dress is because that was the brightest part of the scene. Again, it almost feels counterintuitive because you would imagine that the brightest thing is going to be Demi's face because it's nearest to the light source, but it's not reflective or not as reflective as the dress is. So you expose for the dress. My focus is on the face, is on Demi's eyes. My focus obviously is going to be Demi's eye here, but I'm exposing for the brightest part of the photograph. And oftentimes when I say, although I am exposing for the brightest part, I'm also being very safe. I'm really underexposing to make sure that I don't blow anything out. Because trust me, and this has happened to me in the past, the worst feeling ever is taking a photograph like this, thinking, oh, I'm really excited to get this back. You look at it on the computer, you've blown the highlights, and it's lost. You can't bring them back. So honestly, make sure that you don't blow out the highlights. And sometimes you do that by exposing quite a lot to make sure that you don't. So let's just move on. Again, reflection. Now I did for this one have a little video light. We've not talked about video lights, and I don't really talk about them very much because I very rarely, if ever, use them. In fact, I don't even take them to a wedding now. But the video light was here. And I was hitting the bride and groom with a warm light as well. So you can get video lights that allow you to change the white balance of the lights. And that's really cool because it allows you to get creative with color temperatures. Because what I realize is if I hit the bride and groom with a warm light, that means that they're going to go very orange. So what we then do in post, or you can do it in camera, it doesn't really matter which way you do it, is correct that white balance by bringing down the white balance. So when you do that, not only do the bride and groom then look a bit healthier in terms of the light that's hitting them, their skin tone is going to be healthy, but the background goes really, really blue, very cool, because we've dropped our white balance. So that's just something else that we've not spoken about yet. Excuse me. Have a drink. And you can do that with speed lights as well. And that's where like you would use things like a CTO gel. Same thing. If you hit a bride and groom with a warm gel, CTO gel is basically just an orange gel. They're going to go really orange, obviously. So we correct that by lowering our white balance. Conversely, what that also does is it makes the sky go, or all the rest of the scene as well, it's going to go very cool and very blue. So it's a good trick to create really deep colors. And you can do the opposite as well. So if say like you have a bit of orange in the sky and you want to make it really, really fiery and red, then we do the opposite. So if we then hit the bride and groom with, say, for sake of argument, a blue gel. Again, you can get color correction gels, but for sake of ease, I'm going to say that's it with a blue gel. They're going to go they're going to look ill. They're going to go blue. So what do? We increase the white balance in camera to make their skin tone look correct. But what that also does is it increases the white balance of the rest of the frame as well. So if you've got a little bit of orange in the sky, that orange becomes really warm, really red. And again, it can make a sky look really cool. And it can only be done in camera if you're using gels. So that's what I've done with this photograph. Basically, I've hit them with a warm light, and that's meant that I've corrected that in post, and that's where the really deep blue of the skies come from. And this here that you're looking at, the foreground, this is all a glass table that I've just positioned. Well, no, it was already there, sorry, and I have positioned the lamps. So again, although these might look, and hopefully, if I've done a good job, then they look, quite cool. I would like to think that they look nice, but they're simple. As I keep on saying, I am not a good technical photographer or anything like that. All I've done is over the years, and again, this isn't something that I've been able to pick up overnight. I've just trained myself to look at things in a bit of a different way. But I made a video again recently, which I've called like looking for triggers or using creative triggers for whatever it's called. It's about 5 videos back, but that will again shows you like the things that you can train yourself to look for. Silhouettes. We've not spoken about silhouettes yet, but this is a reflection photograph. So the reflection here is just another glass table, the simplest of shots. Again, I'm exposing for the brightest thing, which would have been probably the wall lights. then that means that everything else is going to go underexposed. Put our bride and groom in front of a light, and it's easy. Well, I say it's easy. It is when you've trained yourself to look for these things. That's a puddle, just natural, nothing to do with my phone. That's just a mirror that's on the wall. This is my makeup mirror again, and these blue lights that you're looking at here, that's come from the makeup mirror. Again, if I just show you that mirror again, because I'm conscious some people are joining us all the time. The mirror that I used to use my phone for reflections, I now use this mirror, has these lights. In fact, I wonder, let's turn this off. There you go. You can see the lights. And back in the room. So the lights that you're looking at in this photograph are from that makeup mirror. Again, I'm sure I often get asked for links to these things. I don't know of a link to them, but if you just search on Amazon for makeup mirror, you'll find it. I know that a few people who've been on my workshops have bought that same light, so they're definitely very easy to find. Right, so this was actually a greenhouse. So again, it's one of those situations where it didn't really look. A winter wedding, a greenhouse, it was cold, doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. But when you look for the reflection, then again, that's when you can start to see the world in a different way. So I was asked a question before about videographers. This is my friend Jonathan Anelli, who's a videographer himself on his wedding day. Shout out to him, amazing videographer, called Red Seats, if you ever want to look at his work. Might just break off for questions again. Hope you're all doing well. Still staying with me. I think we're doing well for questions. Sorry, this is very boring when I'm reading the questions. I realise that. I think we're good actually for questions. Let's go back. People asking for links to the mirror. As I say, I honestly, if you go onto Amazon, again, it's makeup mirror, portable handheld mirror, something like that. In fact, if you go onto one of my videos, most of them, if not all of them, have a link to an Amazon shop. I don't know how up to date that is. I haven't updated it for a long time, if I'm being honest. But if you click on there, I may have linked to it in there. If not, I apologise. But yeah, just basically go onto Amazon and search for makeup mirror, portable mirror, something like that. Question from Nick. Coke or Pepsi? Coke. I answered that in my latest video. Coming to you in the next few days. I've just spoiled that. That's a spoiler I bet you all were hanging on the edge of your seats for. Right, we've got on to now the fractal filter. So the fractal filter is something that I've spoken about a few times in my videos. And I always say it's one of the things that we would call in the UK a Marmite thing. And what that basically means is you'll either really like the effect of it or you'll hate the effect of it. And there's often not really a middle ground. So the fractal filter is this. So it's, again, I know that I'm going to get asked where this is from. Actually, I think I can I write in the chat myself? Whoa, we are getting fancy now. I think, I might have spelt this wrong. I might have spelt it wrong. It's something like Get Fractals or something like that. But yeah, this, again, works best on a 35mm. All these shots that I'm showing you are taken on a 35mm. Virtually all of them anyway. I'll tell you if they're not. But yeah, they're all taken on a 35mm lens. And again, to use this, so if you'll be able to see, there you go. The middle part of this is just clear glass. And the edges have this sort of weird distortion. So when you put your camera right in front of the lens, and it's like that far away, something like that, it gives you this sort of weird effect. All this stuff is so odd to my documentary photographs, but we've spoken about why that is. And the effect that it will give you is like this. This is a raw file, edited. As I say, you will either like these or you'll probably hate them. And it doesn't matter whatever it is that you choose, whichever side of the fence you're on. But this is how it's created. So nothing more difficult than simply putting that filter right in front of the lens. Right, we're not going to that one just yet. So that is the fractal filter, it's called. It's a really quick and easy way to create a shot that is very different. And as I keep on saying, these are the shots that I post online, post on my Instagram, which tend to do quite well for me. And I've had inquiries off the back of these images. So that is why I like to take them. I mean, as it turns out, I am a fan of that look anyway. But I say it's no bad thing from a business point of view either. Nick's made a good comment here. So I'm going to applause this one, which is that if you buy this filter, annoyingly, you have to buy it in a pack of 3. And the reason I say it's annoying is because I think only that one is decent. It does come with another 2, which I don't even know where they even are anymore. I may have even given them away, I don't know. But the other 2 I couldn't really get on with. So it is a shame that you can't just buy it on its own. Maybe you can off eBay, I don't know. So, yeah, let's just move on. So this one you may have seen, again, because this is from a video that I made. The foreground here is tinfoil. As somebody said there, aluminium. We call it tinfoil in the UK. It might be aluminium wrap in other countries. I'm not sure. Basically, the stuff you just buy from the supermarket and you basically put in your oven oftentimes to cover food up and things like that. Really simple. But the great thing about tinfoil, aluminium wrap, is that when you scrunch it up, it has lots of little shiny parts to it. And then again, when you add a light on that, an external light, that's where this effect comes from. So it's a really simple setup. And again, you probably no prizes for guessing. This was taken on the 35mm. Again, there is a video on my channel which shows you exactly how I took this photograph. Now this is the same moment, the same setup, everything's the same, but this was on an 85mm. This is shooting through flowers, 35mm, so all natural light and just shooting through foreground colours. So I've not added anything for this shot. This again is the trick that I mentioned to you before about using white balance. So I shot this at a very, very low white balance. So there wasn't actually a blue gel behind the couple, which you might suspect that there was, but there wasn't. I just shot this at a very low manual white balance in camera. And then I lit the leaves up with, I think it was 2 speed lights with a red gel attached. Now that's not going to give you that extreme contrast out of camera, but you can easily then just exaggerate that in post. But you have to give yourself that head start by doing it as close as you can in camera. So again, the blue is created because I shot this at something like 2,500 Kelvin, whatever the lowest Kelvin you can go on your camera is. That meant that these leaves obviously were going to be very blue as well. But I then lit them with, I think, 2 external speed lights, both of which had a Magmod red gel attached. And then I exaggerated that in post. And that was how that was taken. Now, there is a little bit of haze behind the couple there, as you might be able to tell. That haze is basically coming from the fact that it was quite foggy and misty. So that's it. If you ever sort of see, again, a bit of a trigger, if you ever see sort of fog, mist, things like that sort of weather conditions, know that when you backlight, you're going to get a really nice halo. And that can look really cool. So speed lights, backlighting in fog looks epic. So that's a good thing to remember. This is one of my favourite photographs that I've ever taken, this one. Mainly as well because of the crazy conditions. This is my friend Demi again, who is an amazing model. She's absolutely brilliant. And I'd advise, let's just talk about this for 2 minutes, because one of the best ways to practice, and you need to be able to sort of get as good as you want to be able to be. You know, you want to continually be practicing. And I'm doing that as well. Like, YouTube for me, my YouTube channel is actually a really good excuse to make me go out and practice. But that's what I'm doing. I'm always trying to think of new ways to create creative images, you know, and trying to stretch myself and think in different ways. But one of the ways that I do that isn't just by, you know, sitting at home and thinking. It's by going out and shooting on practice shoots. And I'm very fortunate that I know 2 or 3 models now who I have worked with quite a number of times, and just get in contact with and say, oh, would you like to do a shoot? And it's really good to do that. It is one of the best ways to practice is not on a wedding day. The best way to practice is when you're outside shooting with zero pressure, just shooting for you. So it doesn't matter if nothing works. But what you'll find is that when you shoot like that, you'll get more creative naturally because there's no pressure. The hardest thing to do is trying to create these photographs on a wedding day when you've not practiced them, because you're going to get really stressed out. And I know I would do as well. Like if I want to try a new technique and I haven't tried it on a practice shoot, yeah, you can do it, obviously, but you don't want to learn on the job, really. So I would really, really recommend that you either get in touch with a model or just a member of your family or a friend, anyone basically, to go out with and practice. And the more you practice, guaranteed you're going to get better. It's impossible to not get better if you practice. So one of the best pieces of advice that I ever feel I can give is to do that, is to go out and shoot for you, shoot with no pressure. And when you start doing that, you'll think, oh, I love this. And that's when you're going to start getting your best work. So yeah, I really need to stress that. So the photographs that I'm showing you now, a lot of these that I'm showing you were taken on style shoots. And I've then taken them into my wedding work, but they don't start off on my wedding work. They start off on style shoots. So this was taken on a beach in the UK. And I'm obviously using reflection of a puddle, a little pool of water on the beach. And then that was the edited version. Again, there is a video on my channel where you see me taking this. It's one of my very, very first sort of videos where I've tried to film my behind the scenes. So it's not great quality, but it will show you how I created it. And it also shows you the editing as well. So you literally see how I edited from there to there. This is another shot which has done quite well for me in terms of, like, you know, getting likes and things online. This was taken at a venue in the UK called Broadoaks, and this was taken again. I'm exposing for. Oh, actually, I'm not. I'm lying. Sorry, I'm not exposing for the lights here. I'm introducing all the lights for this photograph. This was taken again. There's a video on my channel. There's a speed light behind the fountain to light the water up, and there's a speed light behind the couple. And this is the raw file. Now, all this, again, is another thing to remember. Never underestimate just how much detail there will be in a raw file. So if you take a shot like this, you might think, there's not that much detail. There'll be loads of detail in there. You just need to bring it out. Again, there's lots of editing tutorials within my Patreon which show you exactly how I edit this. But the end result was that. So that's the raw file. And that is the final image. That's the 35mm version. And oh no, I didn't. I thought I had the 85mm version. I don't. But yeah, that was just taken with two speed lights in the pitch black. It was pitch black at that point, as you can tell, because the only light in this scene is coming from the speed light behind the couple, which I've placed there, and the speed light behind the fountain, which again I've placed there. Again, another one. This is the reflection. This is the before. That's the after. This was actually on the first one I've shown you, which was taken on the 135. So this is just completely natural light. This is about moment. I've not spoke about posing yet or creating a moment. But again, one of the biggest things I think as photographers we can forget when it comes to taking portraits, especially if we're trying to take creative and clever portraits, we forget to add the moment into the photographs. And it's the moment which takes a photograph from here to there. So I'm always trying to think to myself, like, once you've got a composition that you're happy with, once you're happy with your setup, get a safe shot. That's always good to do. But equally, then think, right, how can I add in a moment and try and give that photograph emotion and life? And we do that by creating moments between our couples. And that is exactly what I did here. And there's tricks that you can do, there's things that you can say to your couples to do that. This was taken on the 35mm, probably a minute after this one. So they're taken, but you can see the difference in terms of the background. So I'm actually quite far away from the couple there. I like to throw the background out, but with this one, I've come in much closer on the 35. Now this is the gel. I don't think we've spoke about this yet. This is backlighting, but not backlighting having the light onto the bride and groom. It's backlighting obviously by putting a light behind them. And this photograph rather was taken with one speed light behind the couple, projecting onto the wall with a blue gel and a Magmod grid. And the grid gives you this really cool circle of light. And then when you've got a bright area like that, whatever you put in front of that area of light is going to turn into silhouette. So that's why that one was taken. But again, remember, what am I exposing for? If you saw this scene with your eyes, then it wouldn't be that dark. So any guesses what I'm exposing for here? Again, whoever gets it first gets a shout out of applause. So what am I exposing for? Because if I didn't expose for these things, I would have lost detail. I would have blown out the highlights. Again, the rule to always remember is you don't want to blow out highlights. Let's see who gets it first. I mean, it's fairly obvious what I'm exposing for, I think. Correct. Steve again. Excellent. Yeah, I'm exposing for these lights down here. Because again, if I don't expose for them, I'm going to lose detail, and that would then just become... Sorry, everyone else is getting it right now. Well done, everyone. No, good. I thought Martin's come up with an answer here, which I thought other people would say, which is the window lights. But no, I wouldn't have done, because I'm almost sure that these lights at the bottom would have been brighter than the windows here. But yeah, if the lights weren't here, you're completely correct. I would have exposed for these windows. Completely natural light, 135mm. Nothing really to say about that. I'm shooting through foreground flowers, bokeh. Again, though, now obviously, we can't always save the highlights. In this scenario here, the sun was so low and so bright that I knew I was going to lose detail. It's impossible not to. So don't lose sleep over that. There's nothing you can do. If I had have exposed for that bright light, this would have been literally pitch black, so dark that I wouldn't have been able to pull back any detail. So this is probably the first photograph which I'm showing you this evening, which is completely blown out in the sky. But I don't really mind too much, because you get this warm light and sort of like the flare from there, which I think is quite nice. This is a complicated one. And Nick, who is on the stream, I don't know if you're still watching, this was his sister-in-law wedding, and I love this photograph. It's one of my favourites. This was my trick to try and create fake warm sunset light, and I do that by adding 3 things onto a flash. So to create the fake sunset, and there are rules for doing this, which I'll explain in a second. We want to get a speed light. Firstly, I want to put a grid on. You don't really need the grid, actually, so I might be lying to you. Maybe you don't need a grid. I tell you what, let's talk about this without the grid being on, because this isn't about spilling light so much. What you definitely do need, though, is a gel. Now, this is green, obviously. We're not going to use green. Imagine this is orange. So an orange gel, or a full CTO gel, and the sphere, and that goes onto your speed light. If you then do that, and then put this just out of the frame. So if you're looking at this video here, I will be positioning this. Say the whole of this video is our composition. That's where I'm going to put the speed light. And because of that, I'm just going to get the flare coming out of the light. And that's what so if you have your speed light in the shot, it doesn't really look realistic. But if you have the speed light just out of frame, that's when you're going to get the warm light. Oh, thank you very much, mate. So that is how I then got the warm light that is behind Anna and Ben here. And the foreground is basically flowers that I have also lit with a speed light. So this was 2 speed lights. One is the warm light behind the couple, and the other is lighting up these flowers in the foreground. But it wasn't sunny at this time. The sun did come out as it happened, came back out, but it wasn't sunny at this time of the day. So you can do this even if you've got a cloudy day, and that can be a lifesaver, because especially in the UK, we don't always get good light. If we do, it's a bit, it's a bit of a rarity. And even on the days when we do get good light, often it's sun, then cloud. then sun, then cloud. So it's difficult to always get that good light. So it's a good trick to have up your sleeve that you can create the warm light even if it isn't there. The other thing that you also want to do as well, I found, is that you want to make sure that you place your speed light where the sun actually would be, even if it's covered by a cloud, because that's going to make the natural light element of the photograph feel much more natural. It's not going to look great if you put the light in a completely different position to where the sun would be, because if you do get any natural light, it's going to look a bit odd. Whereas I'd like to feel it's more natural when you're doing two things. You're putting the light where it would be anyway, but also, I say, out of the frame. Simple photograph. Again, I'm exposing for the brightest part of the scene. Probably this could have been here, I can't remember. But again, I'm using a speed light to the side here. In fact, this is not an ideal shot for me by any point, because I've hit the wall there with my speed light. But if I didn't use a speed light, then the bride would be more or less in complete silhouette, and you can tell that by how bright it is outside. So I've had to expose for probably these lamps, I'm guessing. The bride would have then gone into complete darkness, and I've lit her with a speed light, but not being careful, not critiqued myself when I'm shooting, because I shouldn't have this little bit of wall light here. So slap on the wrist from me. Let's just go back to the comments, see how we're getting on. I'm almost finished now, by the way, as well, especially because we've been going on for over 2 hours. So if you do have a question, please do jump in and let me know. Someone said, please save this live session on YouTube. I'm not sure if it will be, to be honest, because I'm worried it's going to mess up my retention stats and all that. It will be saved and be available to rewatch in the Patreon. Again, just to give 2 minutes on the Patreon again. The Patreon is the home of all my online training. So it includes lots of benefits. I'm going to fly through them. Firstly, you get access to a private Facebook group, which is a brilliant community. Trust me, it is a really active Facebook group. Loads of people in there are supportive of each other. They help each other. And I'm so proud of it. So you get membership of a Facebook group. You'll also get access to the whole back catalogue of content, which, as I said before, is now 50 or 60 hours of Patreon only content. And you'll also be able to join in on at least 3 live streams a month. One of them is with an external person, a wedding industry expert. There's also bonus content for the YouTube videos that I make. There's editing tutorials in there. There's critiques. There's so many benefits, and I'm so proud of the Patreon. But I say the biggest thing for me is if you join, and you can join just for 1 month and then just leave. If you join, you get access to everything. So you don't just join and then get whatever is available that month. You will be able to see everything that I've created in there. And that is content that I've been making weekly since May. And I say it's now up to 50 or 60 hours. So this stream that you're watching now will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Patreon. But this is just touching the surface of what it is that I offer within the Patreon. It's basically this on a weekly basis. Carla said he's only in the Patreon for the banter. The banter is getting good. It is getting good. And, you know, the group is really nice. It's really good. And I try and comment on every single post that is in there because... And the thing is as well, with the live streams that happen every week, that's another reason that the community's grown really well in there. Just because we're seeing each other every single week, and that's really nice. And you know, I've made friends in there, and I just can't wait for the time that we can arrange Patreon meetups and stuff like that, because it's gonna be cool. Because I feel as though I've got to know the members really well over the past few months. It's one of the upsides of the past few months, which, you know, obviously for wedding photographers, we've not been in a very fortunate position. We've been impacted massively. But it's allowed me to have the time to create this resource that I'm so proud of. So yeah. So we've now got a question. How do you focus on your subject when it's pitch black? That's a really good question. And it's not a question that has an easy answer. To be honest, the A9 is freakishly good at focusing. And when you put on a Godox trigger on top of the body and turn that trigger on, it goes into what you would almost call like off-camera flash night vision mode, which it's like magic, but it allows you to focus really well. But I'm aware that the A9 is better at focusing low light than most cameras. So a good trick is to use your phone, turn on the torch like this and give this to your subject. So, and ask them to hold it, light themselves, get your focus. Then either, if you're using back button focus, don't touch your focus again. So you've got your focus, then ask them to hide this, put that in a pocket or something, put it on the floor. You've got your focus. So if you're using back button focus, don't refocus. Or you can then get your focus and put the lens or your camera into manual focus. And again, you're not going to lose your focus then. And all you have to do then is press the shutter. So that's the best way to do it. And I've done that regularly. I do that often. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, party. Any excuse. Oh, good question from Nick. Nick's always good with his questions. He asked me a couple of good ones for the video that I've just made. Although I didn't get to answer all of them, Nick, in that latest video because I've cut my finger and I had to cut it short. It wasn't a pretty sight. So Nick said, what's the worst thing that should be banned from weddings? Ooh, I feel like under pressure to come up with like a funny answer. I do get frustrated. Do you get frustrated when people have phones? But equally, I get why they would. If I went to a wedding, I'd have a phone. I think it's. I'm going to say. I'm going to say, wedding coordinators who just want to not give you any time, who just basically want to run the day all the time. That can be so annoying. I've been lucky enough to work at a lot of venues where you don't get bothered. They just allow the day to run really naturally. But there are some venues that I've worked at where the coordinators are just always there, moving things. You have to do this, you have to do that. And that can do my head in. Hundreds of group shots as well I'd like to ban. There should be a blanket ban on anything over, say, 12 group shots. Ideally less, but that's what I'll go with. Question here from Steve. Do you ever use the Godox Focus Assist Grid on the focus, even without? No, I don't. Again, the reason being that I don't have a problem focusing in low light with the cameras that I'm using, but that would be a good thing to do if you did. Yeah, so what Steve is referring to there is, I think I'm right in saying I don't ever use it, but this on your trigger, that can project out a beam which you can use to focus. The only downside of that is you're getting like a red light on your subject. But yeah, if I was shooting with my DSLR, I'd use the phone technique which I mentioned, or maybe that. Yeah, so that's a good point you made. Thank you for that, Steve. Yeah, Carl just said one of the worst things that should be banned is masks. Controversial. Also got a glockenspiel. Nice. Triangle. Right, so. Right, is there any other? I think I've gone through all my. Oh, no, I've not. Let's just fly through. But say, if you have any other questions, I will be wrapping things up soon. But thank you again for joining me. But let's just go through these images before I do. Again, if you haven't done so, I would really appreciate if you could please like the stream. It really does help get this video out there on YouTube. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So this one, again, hopefully, what I like to think is by showing you like lots of these images, one after the other, you will start to see themes and recurring things. And what one of them, I hope, is 35mm and exposing for the brightest part of the photograph, which is exactly what I've done here. So I've exposed for these lamps. That's made everything go dark. Then in the other room, I placed a bride and groom. Now they're in complete darkness, but I've lit them with a light, an off-camera flash. But again, this photograph does not look like this if you look at it with your human eyes. So you have to train yourself to think like a camera. Again, looking at the brightest thing. Just natural window light. This is it. Somebody asked before, would you expose for the sky? This is an example where I have done that. So I've exposed for the light here. The brightest part of this photograph is the sky. And I've lit the bride and groom here with, I think, 2 speed lights. One behind and one on the stand here. And then I've cropped out the stand in post. Now you could, I suppose, I've never tried this, but you could use the mag beam, I imagine. But yeah, I didn't with this one. I just used one speed light placed around here and then just got rid of that in post using content aware fill just natural light. Not sure why this one's in here. Just natural light portrait. One light behind the bride and groom. What I'd say about backlighting couples, I am going to be making a video soon about backlighting. The main thing to remember is that you're not to block the detail, and I have a bit here in the veil. Now, I could really probably improve that by going back and cleaning that up, but it's very easy to lose detail in the veil, so be careful of that when you're using backlight. And a good way around that is to place your light behind the groom, because often if we're shooting a bride and groom, the grooms are wearing a suit, which are much less reflective and transparent than a dress, and especially a veil. So place your light behind the groom. It's one speed light, again exposing for the sky. One speed light behind the couple. Bit more complicated, this one, I suppose. I'm exposing for the ceiling light. So this is very similar to the shot that we showed earlier on, which was this one. I'm exposing for the ceiling lights. So let's go back to that one. Oh, I've lost it. Yeah, I'm exposing for the ceiling lights. Everything else goes dark. Reflecting the bottom half back with the prism. Shooting completely natural light, shooting through flowers in the foreground. Again, 35mm. Natural light, 35mm. Another example where we're using harsh light. Same as applies to before. We're exposing for the brightest part. The brightest part is Beth's dress, not Beth herself, but my focus is on Beth. This is exposing for the sky again. One speed light placed around here, which my friend Mark was holding up for me, and I've basically took two shots. I took one with the speed light, which Mark would say kindly holding for me, but then Mark walked away from that scene. I took another shot so that I could easily just almost composite it and just copy in the bit where he wasn't over the top. So there would have been a speed light here, but I've got rid of that in post. This is a video on my channel for this one. This was shot with two speed, actually this one is only one speed light, coming from this direction to light Beth. And I've shot through a bar, which again, if you watch the video, it'll make sense, but the bar is lit. So this is all this foreground bokeh is basically like metal in the foreground that is being lit from ceiling lights, and I've exposed for those lights. Using smoke for a Halloween shoot. That's the before. Oh, sorry. That's the after. That's the before. Again, loads of editing tutorials in the Patreon for those that are interested. Done a video about that one. And this is an example where I've created a moment. And moments is really, really important when it comes to portraits. As I said at the beginning, you want to make sure that you don't just stop when you're happy with your composition, your light. Add in that last little bit of something, of life, of energy by creating a moment between your couples. That brings the shot to life. And don't forget that. It's so easy to forget the moment. But that's a good example, I feel, where the moment takes the shot, I'd like to feel anyway, takes the shot up a level. This was taken in the exact same spot as the shot that I showed you earlier with the fake sunset. So a completely different day, completely different time of day, but the spot was the exact same. But with this one, I used 3 speed lights. This was taken on one of my workshops. So speed light in the back, you can just see I've done the same thing. I've put the speed light just out of the frame. I've lit the foreground with a speed light with a warm gel, which has made that orange. This was taken on the 85. I've lit the bride and groom as well. So that's 3 speed lights. Smoke one behind the bride and groom, 1 light behind them. Again though, this shot, I started off by exposing for these lamps. That's always the starting point, exposing for the brightest thing. And that's why I'm just going through so many, to get it drummed into your head. You want to expose for the brightest thing. 3 speed lights for this, 1 behind the couple, 1 up and behind each of the trees. Moment, natural light, easy moment. But the moment is king. If this was just, it could be a nice shot if it was nice and close, but I love this photograph because of the moment. We've not spoke about how you create these moments. It's obviously, it's another subject in itself. But yeah, try and have these things that you mentioned to your bride and grooms to create these moments between them, because that does make a huge difference. It brings shots to life. This was in the rain, 2 speed lights, 1 behind the couple with a blue gel attached, and you can tell it's blue because the light behind them is blue. But that's made the rain stand out as being blue as well. And one speed light in the foreground, lighting them from over here with a warm gel attached, so that that's sort of counteracting the coldness of that shot. But again, really straightforward. And this shot was taken, I reckon we were at, because obviously you'll notice there's no umbrella. I'm very, very lucky with the bride and grooms that I have. And this is a couple called Faye and Woody, who I adored working with. They were amazing. I'm very, very lucky that because I'm showing a lot of I show rain shots, I show all these images online. So bride and grooms are A, aware that these are shots that I take on a wedding day, but B, almost, I would like to think I can get couples excited sometimes for bad weather, because rain doesn't have to mean bad pictures. Rain can be a really good opportunity. So if it rains on a wedding day, especially at nighttime, sometimes I'm thinking, oh, brilliant, excellent, because it can make for such good photographs. And what you want to do is, from the very first moment a bride and groom get in contact with me, I'm showing them these images, so that when it comes to their wedding day, they know that, like, oh, we can get something cool in the rain. And they think that because, or they're aware of that because of like what I've shown them in the beginning. So because of that, bride and groom sort of have trust in you. And when they have trust in you, I can honestly say to them, like, honestly, we'll be outside for 30 seconds. And then once you get them outside, that's when you, with a bit of energy, I don't even think Faye and Woody had an umbrella, to be fair to them. But sometimes I'll have a couple with an umbrella, and then I'm taking a shot and we go, oh, these are amazing, these are brilliant. Throw away the umbrella and try and do that with energy. And they get caught up in it, because ultimately I think shots like that look better without an umbrella. But again, bang, it's done within seconds. So they would have been outside for a minute, probably even less than that. It didn't have an umbrella outside for 20 seconds, but it did have an umbrella, maybe a minute the longest. But it's done quickly. But what I wanted to stress is, sometimes people say to me on my workshops, oh, how do you get bride and grooms out? Like, I don't think mine will come out. They will do if you show them these images. And sometimes that involves me showing them on the day. So it could be that I go outside, it's raining, somebody's off that side. So oftentimes I'm at the outside having a cigarette, and I might just ask a guest to stand there. I'll take that shot and then show the bride and groom, oh, if we go out now, look what we can get. I don't often need to do that, but that's what you can do to try and encourage your bride and grooms to come out. This, we haven't spoke about this, and I've not got it in my bag, because it's been overtaken now by the Canon 50mm 1.2. This was taken with a lens called a Helios. I'm going to put a comment in the chat about this. Helios, I want to say M42, but I don't know if that's right. If you put in Helios lens into Google, there's more to it. Again, there's a video about this, which I've made on my channel. But the Helios, let's say, is not an easy lens to use. It's a very tricky lens to use because everything is manual. It's manual focus, it's manual aperture. On your back of your camera, you won't see any of the settings because the camera can't read it. So it's a tricky lens to use, especially because we're talking about manual focus, photographing people, and people tend to move. So it's not easy to use. However, the good things about it is it's a very cheap lens. I mean, really cheap. I mean, you're talking like $50. £40, something like that on eBay, and there's lots available as well. It's, to my knowledge, the most mass-produced lens ever, so it's not hard to find them. So say they're tricky to use, but they're cheap. But the great thing is they have this ability to have crazy flare coming into the sensor. So if you shoot this when the light is low with a Helios lens, this is what happens. And I love this. And that's the reason I like the Helios lens. I say, I do still use it, but to be honest, the Canon 50mm 1.2 has taken the place of the Helios lens now for me. Because this is the advantage that this lens gives is the same as the Helios, in that it gives you crazy lens flare. However, this also gives you the advantage of having auto things, autofocus, autofocus and things like that. But the Helios lens is worthwhile having in your bag if you don't have a lens which gives you flare, because you can create photographs like this. And to my knowledge, no other lens apart from that Canon will do that. As I mentioned earlier, for some reason, camera manufacturers these days put coating on lenses to stop lens flare, whereas we as photographers often want the opposite. We want the flare. This was exposing for the sky, one light behind the couple, again taken on our workshops. Weirdly, weirdly, you might not believe me, this was taken again in the exact same spot as this one. But this one is completely natural light. Now I'm going to let you into a secret now that that only you know. I'm only going to tell you this. That hole that the bride and groom I'm shooting through, didn't exist. I may have done a bit of gardening. So, yeah, I'm not going to tell the venue that, because it's a venue that I work at a lot. But yeah, I created that hole by doing a little bit of selective gardening. But that was basically backlight. Really lovely, beautiful, natural backlight. But again, even though the bride and groom aren't laughing, there's a moment between them. Do you see, like, one of the reasons I like this, for example, is basically because of what's going on here. Just the look on their faces. And that oftentimes doesn't just happen. We need to coax it out by our bride and groom being comfortable with us, by us saying the right things and just working on these shots until you've got that moment. And then when you've got it, like bang, 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 just make sure you get that shot. But this shot wouldn't be the same if the bride and groom just like glum. You know, you have to remember that the moment is needed to take that shot all the way home, basically. It's a bit like putting a nail into the wall. You can get it to a point where it'll do the job, but to really make it look flush and get it to where you want it to be, just take it home with the moment. Oh, yeah, somebody just said, please permit me. Thank you so much for joining me for the stream. I don't know your real name, unfortunately. AVM Click Station. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. And this stream has already gone on for much longer than I thought it would. So thank you for sticking it out. And I hope you found it useful. Obviously, just a silhouette shot. Again, exposing for the brightest thing. Just so happens to be the sky. Could be a lamp, could be a ceiling light, whatever it is, we're exposing for the brightest thing. Natural light, 35mm. Natural light, 35mm. This is the Helios lens again. As I mentioned, it gives you just crazy, crazy flare. Moment. This is just a natural light shot. Nothing special about it, but the moment, for me, makes it. So never forget the moment. Same. Natural light, window, easy as you like, but the moment takes it to where I want it to be. Now this is taken with the lens, with the crystal, which I showed you before. So mega simple. The bride and groom here were basically in a almost completely black room. I've underexposed the whole scene on purpose. But but you can't see it in this shot. Again, there is a video on my channel where you see how I created this. There was a version of this. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to read comments at the same time. Basically, above and outside of the frame were big chandeliers, but that was really the only light source. So I've lit the bride and groom with a grid, and the reason I can tell it's a grid is you see how the light fall off. The light is hitting the bride and groom here, but then it falls away at the bottom because I didn't want to light the floor, or not very much of the floor anyway. And in front of taken on a 35mm lens, and in front of the camera lens is this crystal. And I would have put this, I would have been making sure that the chandeliers are just out the frame, but this crystal is going to give you that crazy firework effect. And that is how that photograph was taken. So again, just a crystal bought off Amazon, really cheap, probably a couple of pounds, but can give you this really unique effect. And it's my belief anyway, that it's impossible to create that look without using a crystal like this. Let's just fly through the rest. Same wedding, just a light behind them with a gel on. Do you see with this one though? Sometimes when it comes to silhouettes are all about... Oh, sorry, I'm not even showing you what I'm showing you. Silhouettes are all about the shape of the couple. So it's easy sometimes with silhouettes just to have what people call the penguin pose. It's just like couples, bodies close, looking at each other. Nothing wrong with that. I'll do that myself quite often. But it's always nice to try and make the shape a little bit more interesting, whether that's by a couple walking. But with this one, I've done that by asking the bride to put her hands over the groom's shoulders and then to just like placing hands like this. Again, you don't want the hands to be like that because that's going to look strange. And equally, you want to make sure it looks natural, but hands like this look really nice in a silhouette, I feel. The other thing which you want to make sure is that the bodies are close. If you do that and there's not a big gap between the couple, then it doesn't really work. Now, the other thing to be aware of, I don't have any examples of this because I'm aware of this, but never, when you're posing couple for a silhouette shot, have a separation between the body and have them holding hands low down. I'll leave it to your imagination what happens when you do, but it looks wrong. So have the bodies really close so that there's no gap. And then try and, something interesting. But again, for silhouette shots, walking looks nice. Maybe groom picking up the bride. Anything that just makes the shape look more interesting. I say, silhouettes are all about shape. Right, I think now we are just about there. Natural light. Shooting through chandeliers with one speed light behind the couple. But again, look at the shape that I've tried to create there. I forgot to say, you want the bodies to be close, but a distance between the heads. Never try and let the heads overlap, because it just becomes like a mess then. I think that's the reason why kissing shots don't work well for silhouettes, because you need to have the separation. And that separation might only be 2 or 3 pixels wide, but it's still important to have that separation. Exposing for the brightest part of the photograph, which is this lamp, and obviously using one speed light to hit the bride and groom, shooting into a mirror. But again, this shot comes about on a 35mm lens, shooting wide open, exposing for the brightest thing in the photograph. Silhouette shot again. As you can see here, I've tried to inject a bit of movement, a bit of shape, because again, we could just have the couple facing each other, and I do that. I think we all do that. But my favourites are where I've got movement in a silhouette. Again, it's creating a moment within a silhouette. And you don't even need to make out the couple's faces, I don't think, to know that moment is one of emotion rather than just being sort of stood next to each other. This exposing for ceiling lights that was from like a chandelier, and one light behind the bride and groom. Exposing for the brightest lights on the building and lighting the couple. Exposing for the ceiling lights. Exposing for the sky. And that's the last one. Again, exposing for the ceiling lights on the venue and lighting the couple from the front and from behind. But again, creating a moment, trying to create something different, a bit of movement in a shot. And that's what really helps, I feel. So, we have made it. Excuse me, sweating. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions left, please do ask me now, or forever hold your peace. So let's see. Yeah, so question from Martin. Is there a go-to power setting on the flash that you place behind the bride and groom as a start point? If I'm indoors, or behind the bride and groom. Yeah, so if I'm indoors, my go-to flash power is a quarter power, but is a 16th. A 16th. If I'm lighting from behind, probably an 8th power if I'm indoors. If I'm outdoors, probably more like a quarter power or a half power. It's very rare, if ever, that I use a speed light on full power. The other thing to bear in mind is as well, the reason for that is that I very rarely ever shoot a speed light when the natural light is very bright. I'm using my speed lights, my off-camera flashes, when the light is low, often in the evening time, so I don't need full power on my speed lights. Oh, thank you very much. Honestly, let me just say, I love photographing weddings. I'm very, very lucky to do this for a job. But equally, especially in the past recent months, I realised just how much I enjoy. I'm not going to say teaching, because I wouldn't ever call myself a teacher, but sharing is what I'd say. I enjoy sharing little tips that I picked up and that I think others might find of use. And I get a lot of satisfaction. Nothing makes me happier than finishing a workshop and the attendees walking away feeling inspired and excited for their next wedding. Similarly, it's like the same with the Patreon. I get so much satisfaction from doing the live streams and knowing that people have picked things up and have learned things from those live streams. So I just love to help and love to know that people get something from this, because I love this, and the people who allow me to do this, i.e. everyone who watches and subscribes to my YouTube videos, the people who come to my workshops, the people who are members of my Patreon, I owe you all, because you're letting me do this for a job. So honestly, it works both ways. I might be helping you. Hopefully I am, I don't know. But you're definitely helping me, because you're letting me do this for a job. I mean, it's better than working for a living. I think. Yeah. Oh, thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think now what we will do is probably say, any last questions, please do let me know. But yeah, once again, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And as I say, this stream was a thank you for the support that you've given me on my YouTube channel since I started it. As I mentioned at the very, very beginning, I never, ever would have thought that I'd end up, A, making YouTube videos, and B, doing live streams. Believe me, this is not easy for me. I'm a very shy person. I'm an introverted person. I don't find it easy talking in front of other people. So it's a bit crazy that I'm doing this. But the reason that I do this is because of the nice feedback that I get and the belief that people enjoy it. And it's like, if people enjoy doing this, and I'll try and do my best to help you out in return by giving you the information. As I said before, though, don't feel that what I'm telling you is the only solution or it's the right solution. It's not. There are loads of ways. Everyone has different styles. Everyone has different techniques. Everyone likes doing things in certain ways. And don't feel like you have to change for anyone, least of all me. If I can give you little tips that you think, oh, I like that, take the odd little bits into your own style. That's brilliant. But just don't think, oh, I've been shooting with a 7200. Neil says don't do that. I shouldn't do that. By all means, if you like that lens, go with it. I'm only telling you what I do. But there's so many ways to skin the wedding cat. And the last thing to ever do is think that there's a right or a wrong way to shoot. There isn't. There really, really isn't. Do whatever your gut, your instinct tells you to do. That's the way to that's the way to create your own style. That's the way your work's going to become more unique. It's going to become more you. And ultimately, that's going to be for the better of everyone. So I'm aware that I never want to talk about negative things, but there is a lot of ego in our industry and a lot of people out there who give advice that begins with the word should. It's rubbish. All that you should do is whatever you feel is right. So never be put off by people saying things that makes you think that you're doing it wrong. If you look at a picture that you take and you just think inherently within yourself, I like that. If somebody else comes along and says, don't like that, it's rubbish, they may not like it. But if you like it, don't let their opinion put off the fact that you're happy with that photograph. Trust me, the photographs I'm showing you here, I'm very, very aware some people might look at and think, oh, that is awful. I hate that. And that's cool. I like it. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. So stick to your guns and have the belief that if your internal critique is saying, yeah, or your internal critic is saying, I'm pleased with that, that's all that you need. Question from, I say what we'll do. So can I even put on? Let's do this. This is me getting proper fancy now. We'll put on a timer. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. And then when this time's up, we'll finish. Question from, is it Yay? Yeah, sorry, again, apologies. Have you gotten problems with people complaining about flashes being used during the ceremony? No, I haven't, for the simple reason that I don't use speedlights during ceremonies. So for me, a wedding has got to be respected for what it is. And whether it's a church wedding, wherever you are, whether you're at a registry office, whether you're outside, the ceremony part is the day that is the time that I don't want to be noticed. And unfortunately, using speedlights will probably help you stand out. So even if I'm shooting in really, really dark conditions, I won't use speedlights. I'll just bump up my ISO. And let me just say this. I said this in a video that I made yesterday. I've not put it out yet in the Q&A video that's coming out this week. Somebody asked a question on my Instagram, and it's a brilliant question. What's the highest ISO you will shoot at? You feel comfortable shooting at? And the answer is whatever ISO it takes to get the exposure correct. No bride and groom, trust me, I've been doing this for 15 years. No bride and groom will ever look at a photograph and say, "Oh, we really like that photograph. The moment it makes us feel things when we look at that." It's a shame it's a bit noisy. That never, ever, ever has happened or will happen. If the moment is good, don't worry about the noise or what ISO you're shooting at. Shoot at the ISO which allows you to take a relatively well-exposed photograph. Now, I would probably not be giving that advice if this were 2006 again, like when I first started out, because if I use that camera, I think it went up to 1600 and that was it. So you didn't have much, you couldn't do much with it anyway. But even if I could, I wouldn't have minded. If I shoot now, I'll happily shoot at 3200, 64. I don't think I've gone higher than that, but that's not because I don't want to. It's because I've just never had the need to. But I will just shoot at whatever ISO it needs to be at to get the exposure correct. I was lucky enough to photograph a wedding in France a couple of years ago, and it was the hottest day ever. But the couple got married. They had like a little ceremony in a chapel, and that chapel had no lights in it whatsoever. So the outside was really bright. The inside, it was like a cave. And I think I was at something like 64 ISO, 1.8, and my shutter speed maybe like a 60th. It was crazy dark. But I still would prefer to do that than get a speed light out, because if you get a speed light in those conditions, because remember, if you're going to use a speed light to shoot a ceremony because you're worried about your ISO, that means that the ceremony room is very dark, which means that a speed light is going to really be destructive to the moment. So yeah, I don't use speed lights during a ceremony. Jermaine's asked, do I use prisms? Rarely. Yeah, I have used them lots, and I do like prisms. I just don't have one in my bag. But yeah, I'm all, prisms are another crystal, so I've used them a few times in the past. I just don't happen to have one. The reason I don't have one now is that I broke the last one. I'm quite good at breaking stuff. Cool, I think we've done... Oh, Alex said, oh, that's very kind. I'm not going to read it out because it's going to embarrass me, but thank you very much. Really appreciate that, Alex. Thank you. Alex is another one of our patrons. Any other questions before I go? I think we've covered everything. I'm sweating now. What you can't see is the light right in front of me that is mega. I'm touching the light now, as you can probably see from how bright my hand is, and it's getting out a lot of light. Whoa, we've nearly done 3 hours. Whoever has I tell you what, you just tell me in the chat if anybody's actually managed to last the whole 3 hours, because you deserve a medal if you have. I take my metaphorical hat off to you if that is the case. Oh, we've also hit 100 likes as well, which is really nice. So thank you, everyone. If we don't have any other questions, I think what I will do is we will finish the stream. If you would like me to do these again in the future, please do let me know. As I say, I hold live streams regularly in the Patreon, like every week, more or less, at the moment. But I don't mind doing the odd one on YouTube. I say I don't want to get into the habit of it, to be perfectly honest, only because I don't know how it's going to mess up the retention stats and all that sort of stuff, whatever. But yeah, please do let me know if you've enjoyed it. I enjoy doing this, as I said before. I always enjoy doing things like this and knowing that people get value out of it. So if you would like me to do more, then please do let me know. But as I keep on saying, this is nothing to all my patrons that are watching. This is what we do all the time anyway. This is nothing new. The setup is a bit more fancier now. I've got some new lights for this, but yeah, live streams are an important part of the Patreon and why I enjoy doing it so much. Ian has said, are your workshops booked up next year? Yes and no. Mainly no. So basically, I have 3 workshop dates set up for next year. At least half of the places have already gone, but they've not gone because of advertising. They've gone because I was meant to be doing 4 workshops, in October this year. Unfortunately, I could only do one of them because of the obvious reasons. So I had people on 3 of those workshops that have moved to March, but I do have a few places left on those workshops, but I don't really want to advertise them now, to be honest, until I know for certain that those workshops are going ahead. As soon as and to be honest, I'm sure that they will. The way things are looking, thankfully, it's looking like they will go ahead. And what I'll probably do is send out details of how to book. Firstly, I'll give everyone in the Patreon a chance to book on first. And then a week later than that, I'm going to send out an invitation to everyone to book on from outside the Patreon. But those people have to be on my mailing list. So the only people who ever find out about what my workshop places are either members of my Patreon or those that are already on my mailing list. So there are places, and all being well, if it is obvious that workshops are going to go ahead, and I do think it's looking good that they will, I'm going to set up a few more dates as well, because to be honest, the 3 dates that I've already got booked in, I think there's only like 3 places left after you take away the people that are moving from the ones that should have been in October. So I will make more places available hopefully when it looks like obvious that we can do that. Interesting point here that Carl's made. F-Stop has set up a channel just for their live streams. Interesting, and they will have done that, I bet, for the reason that I've just touched upon, which is that the YouTube algorithm, we all become a slave to it. And you look at things like videos do better if they are watched for a large duration of time now. You're looking for at least 50% duration when it comes to watching YouTube videos. That's what I'm trying to achieve. The chances of somebody watching a live stream that's 3 hours long for 50% of that time is low, so it can upset the algorithm a little bit. That's what I'm concerned about. So that's why, to be honest, I don't think I will do many of these on YouTube unless there's a big demand for it. But as I keep on saying, if you do like this, trust me, if you take anything away, just believe me, the Patreon is well worth it. You'll get all the content and invitations to all the live streams that we do. Thank you, Joe. Oh, very kind. So, right, I think that's every question answered. Oh, sorry, Martin said sport or center weighted metering. It doesn't matter for me because I'm using everything's in manual on my camera. I get my exposure from looking at the EVF. I do use spot focus, but the camera doesn't have any bearing on that, on the exposure. Everything's manual. Oh, thank you, Carl. Smash that like button smash that like button, subscribe, and join the Patreon. Thank you, Carl. You get an applause and a party noise. Well, that's like the worst party in the world. I feel bad finishing this when there's 50 odd people left, but I think we've answered every single question. So yeah, I'm going to leave you now. Thank you very much for watching. I genuinely mean that. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Argon. Nice meeting you too. I'm going to leave you now with a little video just explaining why the Patreon is the best money that you can spend. And remember, the Patreon is not, you can save 16% on an annual membership, but you can just join for 1 month, get access to all the content, and then leave if you don't like it. So I'm going to leave you with that. But thank you for watching. Thank you for all the comments. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I will see you all soon. Thank you for supporting the channel as well. It always means a lot to me. Thank you. One of the things I'm most proud of since starting my wedding photography business is my Patreon. My Patreon is now the home of all my online photography training, and I truly believe that it is the best value wedding photography training resource available. Since starting the Patreon in May this year, it has now grown into an amazing, helpful community of over 100 wedding photographers, and the feedback that I've received from members, as you'll see here, has just been incredible. By joining the Patreon, you will instantly receive so many benefits. I host 3 live streams a month, one of which will be with a wedding industry expert. You'll receive membership of a private Facebook group where you can ask me any questions, my Lightroom preset pack, and an accompanying video showing you exactly how I use those presets to edit my images, exclusive videos, giveaways, and bonus content from many of my YouTube videos. And best of all, by joining you will receive instant access to the whole back catalogue of content. Now that includes editing tutorials, critiques, business advice, live streams, website reviews, SEO advice, my guide to Instagram, and so much more. There is already over 50 hours of exclusive content, and that is growing every single week. And for Black Friday, if you join in November, you can save 16% off an annual membership. Everything that I know about wedding photography, all my experience, the tips, the tricks, I share it all in my Patreon, everything. So if you want to improve your wedding photography and grow your business, join now and come and join me and the community.